evening, Demon fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and thank God this season is finally over after the insipid, error-riddled game from the Demons, in which they were embarrassed by traditional rivals Collingwood to the tune of 46 points, ending the season in 14th place. Once again, George can't join us tonight, so joining me tonight to dissect our uninspiring final game of the season is Bin Man. Good evening, Bin Man.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, George. If you're listening, good evening, Demonland posse. Well, it was what could I say? It was like a metaphor for our entire season, wasn't it, that game? Like when I heard Lever going out, I thought, right, that's just so typical of our season. And then the weather, and you don't often sort of interact on Demonland much. You're an excellent poster, but you put lots of content up, a lot of media stuff. But I noticed you gave me a drive-by.
Yeah, I did.
A pre-match thread. I don't know why, because if you read that post, I completely accurately predicted that it would rain before, it would clear up, and then it would come hammering down in the second half.
I can't even remember now my drive-by. Often I drive by and keep driving.
No, my drive-by initially, I said that it would clear up, and then I hadn't properly looked at the thing, and you said that's as good as my tips.
Oh, yeah, okay.
My tips, and then I amended it afterwards, so I was spot on. But I thought the lightning delay was, the whole night was the perfect metaphor for our season. What could go wrong did go wrong. Arguably, a big chunk of it's our fault. We can't blame the weather. I joked that I saw the lightning in the distance, and there was lightning actually, like it felt like right over, and it was full 15 minutes before they canned the game. And I had to convince one of my mates and not the other that you don't leave footy. And I looked over to where you were, and I noted it, and I had my binoculars on your area you sit, Annie, and I have to say I noted that you were not there.
I didn't stay for the lightning. I did escape. It was over.
That breaks the golden rule of following the D's. You have to
I will admit I have left games at times, especially when we were getting thumped by 100+ points. I have left. I'm not like you who says I will stick to the bitter end.
You're the sort of supporter that I reckon is why we're in this situation.
Don't you put it on? Don't you put it on me when it's absolutely bucketing down and you're going to be half an hour. My season was done. I hung up the boots.
The metaphor for the season continued after that. So not only did I stay for, it was 9 minutes to go according to the clock on the interchange bench, 9 minutes and 12 seconds to go. Not only did I wait the half an hour for the break, then watch the last 9 minutes of one of the most forgettable games of football of all time, I then managed to jump on an express train to Laverton and ended up in Laverton. And, I'm in Altona. And it was like, right, this season is get out of here, 2024.
I must say, I got home in enough time to see. My train came straight away. I got home in enough time to see the rest of the game.
Oh, really? That's impressive.
Well,
that's
I was impressive. Sort of almost home and I had it on.
Well, I got home well after midnight. So, yeah, I thought it was the perfect metaphor for the season that never really got off the ground.
Because how long was there? There was like 40 minutes or so by the time they warmed up. And I was.
It was good actually because I got to have a really good chat with my friends, and it was a bit like being at the sort of a VFL game, or so it was quite relaxing actually. That break in the weather, and be able to chat in the MCG. And then what an exciting weekend, like a reverse dead rubber or something, or reverse, death ride with thrilling wins for the Suns and the Saints to give us pick 5. I mean, that's a big silver lining, isn't it?
Yeah, the AFL would have been wrapped with the fact that it did go down to the wire. It went to the last game. They would have been very happy with that. So, stuff them.
Stuff the AFL. And did you see they've... I don't know why they put like the second eliminations first and the first qualifying is second.
Yeah, I've given up on footy. All I heard, there was controversy over the Bulldogs that they're playing
Friday night at the same time. They're launching the AFLW season or some such, or
which is the AFL
ground.
Sort of shooting themselves in the foot. You know, do they want to promote the women's game?
Money,
apparently the Bulldogs had requested them not to do that, and they went ahead and did it.
Of course. And what benefit do the Swans get playing on Saturday? The AFL's just purely driven by money. I mean, Channel 7 would have said we want the two Victorian clubs on Friday night, full stop.
That's exactly what.
End of discussion. Don't worry about the game. Don't worry about promoting it in the north. We give you $1 billion to jump to our tune. That's what 7 would have been saying.
Exactly. All right. Well, let's get into the housekeeping before we start the show. And each week I do put the call out to our loyal listeners to help us out by leaving us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts. We love the feedback, and we do reward our loyal listeners who have taken the time to provide these 5-star reviews, and we give them a shout out on the show. And all the way from Scotland, 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝗁𝘀𝗁 writes, the Demonland podcast is chicken soup for the soul. Andy, George and Big Man nourished my soul when I endured 3 months of madness of the Shanghai COVID lockdown. I'm now living in Edinburgh, and the lads again nourish my soul with not only their insight into the game, the team and the coaches, but also in the respect that they show each other in every show. Respectfulness is one of the things I love about the behaviour of the Melbourne Football Club coach and players. The Demonland potty is at their best when the team is not travelling so well. Every society is blessed with the congregation of the miserable, and my word, they come out of the woodwork when things aren't going well. While Andy has undying love for the D's and makes his congregation feel heard, George and Big Man nourish the soul. Well, George, most of the time, a man who should have been US President, Colin Powell, said perpetual optimism is a force multiplier. Amen to that. When we lived in Melbourne, our family hosted 9 of the new D recruits over a number of years. Some stayed more than a year, some less. They moved in with our family within 24 to 48 hours of draft night. A common refrain in the first few hours was, "We're just kids. Why is there so much fuss about us?" Demonland website contributors, please be gentle with them. The boys would much prefer a 6-day break between games, as 7 or more days meant a tough training run, leaving them feeling not as fresh for the game. Andy, George and B-Man, thank you so much for nourishing our souls. Love you guys. You're amazing. Well, D's in the kilt, you're amazing too for leaving that 5-star review, so thank you.
Top review there. I give that review 5-star. There's two good band names in there, Andy. The Shanghai COVID lockdown. I reckon that's a good band name, and I really like Force Multiplier. That's like a heavy metal mathematical sort of band.
You missed the best one. Congregation of the Miserable. Come on.
Yeah, that's that's Force Multiplier's debut album. So
okay, is it?
Yeah.
Well, there you go. Sees what I know. I don't know anything.
No, that was a joke, Andy.
Oh, well, you should have kept running with it. You sounded very convincing. Now I know how people fall for your stats files each week, but not our mate, the Pearl, and we'll hear from him soon. Keep the feedback coming, and we will give you a shout out on the show. If you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, and you want to leave us feedback or post a question or a comment for the show, you can post under our podcast post each week, or just slide into our DMs. We will not read out your full name on the show. And in addition to be available on Apple, Google, Spotify, SoundCloud, and or any of your preferred podcasting apps, the Demonland podcast is available to be watched and listened to on YouTube. Just search for Demonland Podcast to find our channel. And if you want to chat with other Demon fans and you've never been to our forum, head on over to demonland.com, sign up. You can chat with other Demon fans from across Australia and around the world. It is completely free. And in addition to being able to post questions or comments for this show, there's a plethora of topics and threads discussing all things Demons related, so join in on the conversation. Postseason is the best time to be on Demonland. If you'd like to join us on the air tonight to talk about any of the topics we're going to talk about, then please give us a call on 0390163666. That's 0390163666. I'll answer. I'll put you on mute and bring you on when there is a break in the conversation. During the week, give that number a call and leave us a message. We'll play it on the show. But we're on a break for the next couple of weeks, so don't do that. If you're listening live, you can join us in the chat room. Head on over to demonland.com/podcast. And, we're not going to be live next Monday, so I won't read out that. let's get into the match overview. The Demons ended their 2024 season in disappointing fashion, succumbing to a 46-point defeat at the hands of the Collingwood Magpies in a match that was as strange as it was revealing. The game, which saw a lengthy delay due to the lightning in the final quarter, encapsulate a season of missed opportunities and unfulfilled potential for the Demons, who were outclassed and outplayed by a Collingwood side still clinging to faint finals hopes. From the outset, Melbourne looked out of sorts. Collingwood dominated possession with their high-tempo chip and mark style, frustrating the Demons. The absence of key defenders Steven May and 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝗰𝗋 was glaring as Collingwood's forward line found it all too easy to mark inside 50. The Daicos brothers, Nick and Josh, were particularly influential, slicing through Melbourne's defences with ease. The D's lack of pressure was evident by quarter time. Collingwood had already established a commanding 27-point lead. Melbourne showed brief signs of life in the second term, with quick goals from Kade Chandler and Jacob van Rooyen narrowing the margin. However, any momentum was short-lived. Collingwood's response was swift, and the Daicos brothers continued to run amok. Nick Daicos, in particular, was brilliant, finishing the match with 40 disposals, 9 clearances and 2 goals. His brother, too, finished the game with 40 disposals. Melbourne's struggles were further compounded by a contentious incident involving 𝗪cie𝗶𝗀𝗀𝗀, who collided with Collingwood's skipper Darcy Moore. The hit left Moore concussed and forced out of the game, casting a shadow over Pickett's otherwise solid performance. The third quarter saw Collingwood extend their lead once more, with the Demons unable to make significant inroads. Without May and Lever, Melbourne's backline looked vulnerable and Collingwood capitalised on every opportunity. The Magpies' small forward line, combined with their relentless midfield pressure, kept Melbourne on the back foot. Max Gawn battled valiantly in the ruck, but the Demons couldn't breach the gap. And by the end of the quarter, Collingwood had pushed their lead to 33 points. The final term was marred by an extraordinary delay caused by a lightning strike near the G, which, with just over 9 minutes remaining, the game was halted and players were forced off the field for over half an hour. Andy left, as mentioned before. When play resumed, the game was effectively over as a contest. Collingwood continued to pile on goals while Melbourne could only muster a solitary response. The final quarter, one of the longest in AFL history, ended with Collingwood sealing a 46-point victory. Despite the loss, Tom McDonald stood tall in defence, showing great resilience under pressure. Max Gawn was tireless in the ruck. 𝗪cie𝗶𝗀𝗀𝗀 was dangerous up forward. And despite the shroud of the MRO investigation for his bump on Moore, Kade Chandler also put in a commendable performance. The defeat was a fitting end to a frustrating season for Melbourne, who struggled with injuries and inconsistency throughout 2024. The loss highlighted the key absence of some backline personnel and the leadership abilities of midfielders Petracca and Oliver. As the Demons head into the off-season, there will be much to ponder, particularly regarding the need to rediscover their 2021 premiership season mojo, if that is to be found. The return of key players and a renewed focus on pressure and intensity, as well as significant tweaks to their game plan, will be essential if Melbourne is to return to the top of the ladder in 2025. Bin man.
No, not much to say about the match itself. Forgettable is, and I think probably all my thoughts are covered by the questions tonight. There's some really good questions, but yeah, forgettable game of footy, that's for sure. And just one comment I'd say is that sort of 𝗪𝗀𝗪 was probably I think the D's let 𝗪𝗪𝗪 down, who has been pumping up attending games of footy, and it's a bloody reasonable question. Turning up to the game, I thought it was a reasonable turnout, given that maybe there was a bit of nibble of love in there, but it wasn't a very inspiring performance, was it? To reward those like myself, and I won't count you seeing you left early, but like myself, who stayed to the end, to the devoted fans who made the effort, and particularly for anyone who 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪 or our efforts to encourage people to go along went along that way, saying, well, that's it. It's last time I give the D's the benefit of the doubt. So a poor effort all round on the night.
Oh, well, big man, before you take it away with your stats files for season 2024, he's back. Your nemesis, the Pearl, is back. And the Pearl writes, looked carefully at Wheelo's ratings and it was not what I saw with my own eyes at the game. He's taken a shot at Wheelo here. I've watched Nibbler turn the ball over for years now. I'm happy for him to jog on to Adelaide, Give me stats on first touch possessions and midfield to forward line connections. Give me stats on Max Gawn's facial expressions and Fritsch's one-arm tackle attempts. Give me stats on who has checked out and who shits their pants under pressure. Talk about Perlo stats.
That's in the voice of Perlo.
That's how I imagine him to be.
All right, Pearl, you win. You win. To do the stats each week, so a huge shout out to Willow Ratings. Google him, Google them, and download the app. It's a fantastic app, as I've pumped up through the season. All of the numbers that most of, not all of the data that I get from the stats file thread on Demonland, which is awesome. So huge shout out for that. And for the numbers all the season and putting it up so regularly. As I've said during the season, my weekend doesn't really feel complete until I've read the numbers from Willow's ratings and to get a sense of the game. But it takes probably a good hour and a half for me to pull it all together and do the sort of thinking through in my mind about what it means to me, or like what the numbers are telling me, I guess, and the data. And you know what, Andy? This week I'm with the Pearl, because I thought to myself, that game, that effort, that sort of insipidness doesn't sort of warrant me going to the effort of doing all of that analysis. And so I'm not. And not in detail, but I just wanted to flag a couple of things. The game in a nutshell, if I was to pick one stat that a set of stats to describe the match, is the team pressure. The first quarter in a game where there'd been an implied promise, wouldn't you agree, Andy, from Goody during the week, that we would go in with every effort and we'd go in fired up to win?
Yes, certainly. I mean,
get along to the G and all of that stuff. So, a lot went wrong this season, I must say, and it felt very much right from the get-go that the team had, the proverbial cue was in the rack and they just hit the wall, basically. We'll talk a bit about it later, but there's, felt closer to a VFL team when Leeville came out and replaced by, was it Wowie who came in for him? It was, wasn't it?
Yeah, Woden came in, yep.
So, we looked more akin to a decent Casey side running around. We're a long way off our best players. We had from our best 22 out that we have Lever, May, Clary, who else? Track, obviously.
Petracca, if he's still a Melbourne player by the end of October.
Basically, we had 5 of our top 7 players out. So, some of the errors and the poor play were pretty understandable. But so for a game that really, I went along hoping for a victory. Obviously, I could tell very early on that this was going to be not a great match. And, this is reflected in the team pressure ratings. In that first quarter, the pressure ratings were 157. That's us, unless in case you thought it might be the Pies, to their 192. That's massive. That's totally massive. That's a difference of 35. Just something to consider is that they did what every other team has done to us when they've opened us up. They deliberately look to spread us because we're just not covering the ground. And so a 192 rating is particularly noteworthy because you get most of the highest points, physical pressure acts, and obviously tackle. Anytime you touch the opposition, tackle being an obvious one, is 3.75 points. The next one down is 2.25 points for closing acts, which there weren't that many tackles in the first quarter. So the Pies differential 192 is not far off elite, and they just smashed us off the park. They wanted it more. And what was most distressing was that the second quarter, we went down 10 points from 157 to 147. So to 168, 21-point differential. They just took the foot off the pedal. They came out after halftime and lifted to 187, and we could only lift to 158. And we did a little bit better in the last quarter, but that's a meaningless last quarter given the break in it, from 177 to 160. So for the 3 live quarters, we were 157, 147, 158. 180 is considered AFL average. We weren't spreading ourselves. So, that pressure rating is just terrible. It was 161 to 178 for the match. And this will hurt you. On the board that I talk about sometimes, Andy, that faces the players, the electronic board, I mentioned last week, I forget what the previous week, Unity was across the top of in the Port game. What do you think was across this one?
Only a couple more hours of the season left.
That's funny. Good point. Enjoy the dance is what's written across it. So I saw that early on and I thought, right, okay, I'm not enjoying this dance. This is a dance
it's a horrible
that I'm not
dance.
enjoying. And so I presume from that I took exactly how they played. Take on the corridor, take on high-risk kicks, just go for it and enjoy it. And they looked like they did, but didn't really look like they enjoyed it. And I certainly didn't enjoy the dance. So that stat's really a compelling one. In fact, our contested possession was only 8 down, so we're all right in that place. But pressure is everything in footy these days. You can't win with a differential like 35 in the first quarter. So it's absolutely everything. And if people don't think so, I point them towards 3 matches on the weekend: the Saints Blues game, the Port Adelaide Freo game, and what's the third one? The Doggies Giants game. They devolved into the sort of what I've been talking about, the distinction between the home and away season games and when the pressure ramps up come finals. You know, the open, neat little beautiful kicks that the Pies were doing to us all but disappear, and it becomes a grunt sort of absolutely rugby style, win the hard ball. That's where pressure's at. So that's that tension between having all silky ball users and the need to win in the trenches come finals. And Port, for instance, Freo, who cut us open twice this season with that spread and run, they just couldn't get that going against Port and got physically sort of beaten by pressure. So pressure's massive, gets more and more massive as you hit the final. But our pressure was just way below AFL, where it needed to be. Just highlight though on a positive, the number one player, 9 more pressure acts than number 2 was Alex Neal-Bullen. So sorry, Pearl, I can't let that knock on Alex go. As I said last week, easily in my top 10 all-time favourite Melbourne players, and Robbie Flowers number 1 to give a sense of how highly I rate him in terms of my favourite players. He had 56 pressure points, season average 53.8. Kay Chandler was next, 22. Jack Viney, 24. Ed Langdon was 4th. And this I really liked as well, Colton Tholstrup in 5th place. But really it was the leaders, Nibbler, Chandler, Viney and Langdon, who stood up. There were a lot of players who didn't apply much pressure at all. Daniel Turner had 1 pressure act. 1 pressure act, Andy, for 1 pressure point. His season average is only 12, but he had a 12th of his season average. That's remarkable. And Jacob Van Rooyen had 3 pressure acts for only 5 pressure points. So Marty Hoare, 7 and 8. So very forgettable from that perspective. From a stats perspective. So that's all I've got, except for just that final piece of the red and blue print is defense. Is fitness. And, for whatever we can discuss this in the mid-season, in the postseason review. Whatever the cause of it is, we are clearly not fit enough at the moment. We're not running out games. I saw a stat. I think we're only 30% of winning last quarters this season, and a big chunk of them, of the ones we did win, were in the first 5 rounds or 6 rounds of the season. We've been woeful in the last quarter. That's a fitness thing. I also think that there was some half efforts where people, it's a funny psychology. I was super impressed with both the Bombers, I have to say, in their effort in their game, and the Saints. They played right to the wire, teams that wanted to hit the off-season flying and bring that energy into their off-seasons. I don't think Melbourne had the fuel in the tank to do that, and also perhaps didn't have the psyche to do it. There were a couple of efforts. One, I have to say, by a player who I wouldn't, by 𝗟𝗀𝘀𝘁𝗃, who it cost us a goal. It was right in front of me. He needed to straight line the ball and chose not to. Ironically, got injured not long after that, but he just didn't go straight line. They took it out of the contest and kicked an easy goal. And that spread that they were able to do, it was all about our lack of fitness and run. So a lot of people on Demonland pointed out how good their kicking was. Their kicking, was almost under no pressure, as I said before. So any AFL player, except a handful of Melbourne players, are going to hit targets when they're under no pressure. And so we made them look good. We made their kicking look good. As we talked about last week, you need 3 or 4 elite kicks. You just don't, but you just can't carry 4 or 5 ball butchers. And we had 4 or 5 ball butchers, and we weren't spreading to put pressure on them, and we weren't putting pressure on the kicker, and we weren't getting across to to deny them easy ball movement. And so sort of some of all of that is captured in a much more succinct way by the very first question Goody was asked at the presser. So, Andy, if you could play the question and then Goody's response, and then I'll just come back briefly and reflect on those comments.
Simon, are you glad that night's over? It felt like it dragged on for a while.
Yeah, it went for a while, didn't it? Obviously, with coming off of the storm, but look, we didn't play anywhere near the level that we would have liked to have played in our last game, especially after last week. We thought we took a lot of positives out of last week, and tonight didn't reflect the way that we wanted to play. So incredibly disappointing with the night, but certainly dragged on a bit.
And he went on to say, I think that, have you got the rest of that by any chance?
There was another question. I can bring it up if you give me a moment.
The very next question.
Just go. I gotta go. Get it off YouTube. You can just vamp.
I'm just doing it on the fly. Very impressive, Andy. I thought he then goes on to talk about code for fitness, and which is the all-team defense that he talks about, or I forget the exact phrase he used, but when I heard it, I thought, right, he's talking there about our running ability, our ability to cover the ground and work hard to defend the ground. I think it's what he says is our ability to defend the ground.
I'm just going to wait out the YouTube ads. I'm not giving free advertising to this car company that's currently bombarding me with ads. Nor the second ad. And when did YouTube all of a sudden snuck in 2 ads before you can watch anything? I'm not giving this grocery store one of the
big sure 2. That's what they're advertising for, Andy? Not something like
oh, not on YouTube. YouTube's all wholesome. Here we go.
For a while, didn't it? Obviously, with
the question.
Certainly dragged on a bit.
Everything you would have spoken about during the week, was that less than desirable, the way they rocked up tonight and sort of the heat in the game?
Oh, yeah, I think there were some reasons as well. We're coming off a pretty intense game last week in pretty hot conditions, and, just felt like early in the game we didn't quite have the intensity and the speed of the game. And that's certainly not making excuses, that's reality. And there were patches where we worked our way into it, but our execution with the ball and our ability to defend the ground to the level that was required just wasn't there tonight. But that sort of sums up our year a little bit in a lot of ways. We've had some really good, strong performances. We've had some really close matches that we've lost, and we've had some really poor performances. And tonight was one of those poor performances that we put in.
You've obviously been a player as well.
That's it's like that code for ability to ability to defend the ground. What he's talking about there, I think, is ability to run and spread and stop them transitioning the ball with ease, because we just, the amount of times we just left space for them to run into, and they just cut us open. Any team would have if they were half on, and they were, that they came obviously to win that game. I thought it was interesting about the impact of the heat too. So that's the other factor, the fatigue from, you noted how hot it was last week. So 6-day break, they're coming off, it was Saturday night to Friday night, wasn't it? So 6-day break, travel, and the impact of the heat. All of which, if we were super fit, we'd be in better position to, overcome. And if we had closer to our, if we had more senior players in the team, we would have been able to overcome. And if we were, psychologically still in the game, we would have been better positioned to overcome those sort of, those headwinds, so to speak. But, I thought Goody summed it up pretty succinctly there. And he noted about, it being like our season. And one of the things that was really notable about this season was, I think we lost 5 games within a goal. Is that right? Something like that?
It was definitely 4.
Four
We had
or
the Carlton
five.
game, which arguably, we came from behind, but then the GWS, Port Adelaide, the Lions game, 5 points.
Yeah. But then the other really notable feature about this season is how many games we got opened up in, like 40-plus points, which has
like
been
5 or
such
6.
a rare thing under Goodwin. And again, without over-egging their fitness pudding, for me, that's a big part of that. Not the only factor, not the only reason, obviously, is fitness. We just clearly weren't running out games, and as evidenced by the fact we won so few last quarters in the second half of the season. And I haven't got the numbers to hand, but I'd be surprised if we won anything close to sort of 2 out of our last 10 games in the last quarter, maybe 3 out of 10, max. So it was clearly a factor. And one thing I'd say in terms of that discussion about how big a factor is fitness in the game in terms of as a determinant of success, let's say, well, George said 50, I said 30 to 40. Let's say 50 for the sake of argument, and then sort of ability and skill and is 25% just for the sake of discussion, is that one of the issues is that you can have a team who aren't that fit, who can rely on their skills and their ability and the fact that they're better than the opposition, like the Hawthorn teams in their pomp, back in the day, back in the 2010 or whenever, and they won their 3 in a row, is often, they were just better than oppositions. And so fitness was less of an advantage. So you could get away a little bit if you were ultra skilled team with being maybe less fit, less, not so well conditioned as your opponent, but the opposite is not true. If you've got a team that's not particularly skilled and you're unfit, that combination doesn't work. You know what I mean? So because it exacerbates, like poor fitness exacerbates skill. And one of the things is I watched the GWS Dogs game from Ballarat, and the wind was bananas. It was so crazy, and watching Bont kick that goal, like the wind is another thing that exacerbates poor technique, but his technique was brilliant. Like so few players in the AFL would have been able to kick the goal that he kicked, and it was because of his technique is so strong. So, I just think it's been a massive factor, and it's one we've got to obviously get right in the off-season.
Just to add to the unfitness thing, some of it has to do with the young players on the list that don't have those multiple years of pre-seasons under their belt as well, I would say.
It's a massive factor. It's a huge factor because all of the I forget what the term for it is, but essentially incrementally each elite athletes that, that's, I think I mentioned this last week or the week before, is that's why 400 and 800 meter runners get, that they are at their best in their late 20s and into their 30s. And because it's those year after year, it's incrementally. I think Burgess said it in that podcast that was kicking around after our flag win, and even Selwyn Griffith talking to us might have mentioned it. Each year at senior level, your fitness base builds incrementally, which is why when Burgess came in, he said it's going to take 3 to 4 years to build this team into an elite fitness team, because you can't do it. You have to do it incrementally and build on a foundation. Next year you can go a little bit higher, a little bit more. So absolutely the youth, the number of senior players who weren't playing footy impacts, but also the other big factor, Andy, particularly in our inability to run and cover the ground in the second half of the season, is on top of that, how many of our senior players had significant injuries that would have made it incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to maintain their anaerobic running and weights work. So, we talked about them over the last few weeks, but May, Lever, Maxi, obviously Salo, 𝗟𝗏𝘀𝗁, I'm probably missing. There's at least 5 or 6 players who had Turner who had injuries during the season that meant that they're not able to keep training, and keep their fitness levels up. So, there's a lot of compounding reason as to why, we'd be running out of gas come the end of the season. But I don't know what it felt like for you. It felt bar a couple of players, it felt like a full team of players who, in horse racing parlance, they were looking for the line. And they were looking for the line 300 metres out. So,
absolutely.
I've backed plenty of those horses, I can tell you. And once they start paddling 300 out, they're not going to win. And
I was annoyed at that, but probably not as annoyed if we were still a chance to make it and dished up that. I think I was just so uninvested in it. And
that's right.
I was quite happy.
Nice silver lining, as I said, pick
to
5.
Take pick 5. Well, yeah.
That's a serious pick.
It
changes the Houston dynamic because pick 5 is, pick 5.
Forget that. We could be having a bit of a draft haul at this draft because just prior to this, the last 2 weeks we've talked about it, and it's all dropped just before this podcast. A couple of weeks ago, the Tom Morris thing dropped. The track wanted out. We didn't know whether to believe it. Is it Tom Morris up to his old tricks? Demonland went into meltdown. Last week, the rumours didn't go away. And today,
what happened today, Andy? Tell me.
So, let me just read this. Petracca wants out and Star Blue could unlock his potential trade. Contracted Carlton key forward Harry Mackay has emerged as the key to unlocking a potential trade of Melbourne superstar Christian Petracca, who has reminded the club and teammates of his desire to leave the Demons. The Norm Smith medalist reiterated to his teammates on Saturday night and the club during his exit interview on Monday, which is today, that he wants to play for a rival Victorian club in 2025, despite public guarantees from Melbourne CEO, coach and football boss that Petracca would not be traded under any circumstances. 3 club sources and 2 sources close to Petracca, speaking on the condition of anonymity, and I'm sure you love that, B-Man, because of the sensitive nature of the issue, told this masthead, and this is from The Age, that his falling out with the club appears to be beyond repair. The same sources said Petracca was unlikely to formally request a trade because of the difficulty of a deal getting done and because a public request would further inflame his relationship with the Demons. A separate industry figure familiar with the situation indicated that Mackay, as a goal-kicking forward at a marquee Victorian club, was one of the few players who could entice Melbourne into relinquishing Petracca as part of a trade. Everyone involved acknowledges the chance of a trade are remote, given both players are on multi-million-dollar long-term deals, because you'll remember Mackay signed a 7-year deal last year, and it will be difficult.
I think he's up.
Yeah. And it will be difficult to prize Mackay away from the Blues. 3 sources who were at Melbourne's end-of-season function on Saturday night said there was tension surrounding Petracca's presence and that it was noticeably uncomfortable between him and several teammates.
Jeez, what a party that must have been.
Yeah, I know. Eyebrows were also raised internally at Melbourne when Petracca pulled out of an interview on Friday night with host broadcaster Seven. The club originally locked Petracca in for the interview, but Petracca himself pulled out at the last moment after Seven's chief of football reporter Mitch Cleary had also promoted the interview on social media platform X. Melbourne football boss Alan Richardson told 3AW on Friday there was a miscommunication over Petracca's interview. All right, so we're already getting into miscommunications. He was also forthright in stating that Petracca would stay in the red and blue. Well, okay. No, we're not going to trade Petracca, Richardson said. He's a fantastic player, a fantastic Melbourne person. We acknowledge that it's been really tough for him, but our footy club has been built around some really important signings. He's a very important cog in what we're trying to do. Carlton, who has shown interest in the situation, have emerged as a leading contender for Petracca, but there are only 2 players that would appease Melbourne in any form of trade, Charlie Curnow and Mackay. Give me Charlie Curnow, please. Curnow, who shares the same manager as Petracca, Robbie D'Orazio, will not be traded. Mackay signed a 7-year contract extension less than 2 years ago when he was knocked back free agency to extend his tenure at Icon Park until the end of 2030. Mackay's deal, I'm just saying, there's nothing more. The Blues declined to comment. So there you go. And then, it's just blown up on X and Demonland and Gary Lyons thrown in saying Melbourne will absolutely not trade should not trade.
The other thing I was going to get you to clip up from Goodie's presser is that I don't know that this helped particularly, but like the way he framed, he's staying for 5 years, he's signed for 5, like.
Each interview Goody has given about that, where he's been asked questions, so he has to sort of play a straight bat or whatever. He's gotten less convincing as he's gone along.
Well,
he will be a Melbourne player. He may be a Melbourne player. He might not be.
No. This time he was.
He said, as it stands, I think
he's got a contract, and that's.
Yeah, he said, as it stands, he's got a contract. But how many times have you heard so and so coach has the full support of the board, only to have the headline the next morning say so and so has been sacked?
The message is that you got to stay, and the only reason we're moving is that if we get somebody to move.
If the situation is so untenable, like if the fractured relationship between him and other players is so toxic, whatever, we don't know. It's still conjecture. I'm just going off what the media said. If it is irreparable, isn't it, wouldn't they maybe? And the deal was there. Like, I'm not saying we're giving for a packet of chips.
No. Unless the 100% deal that satisfies us, we just don't deal,
How many times has holding a play? I mean, it's happened in the AFL. Papley wanted to leave. Joe Danaher, whatever. Lockie Neal. Yeah, they're three examples. But how bad was the situation? Did all those three have? I mean, what they're saying here is that there's an irreparable relationship between the players and track. How can they play and be harmonious?
Who's the author on that article? Seriously, who's the byline?
That's 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝗁𝘀𝗁. But this is coming from the A. No. I know. But, and I will normally be, I do not believe the Age would publish what they have. This is more 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝗁𝘀 just putting it on Twitter to say that this has a bit more gravity to it. And I get what you're saying and the laughing. 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝗁𝘀𝗁, I'm just looking at a thing on Twitter now. It's a video, but it's got it's on Footy Confidential or what's the one? Yeah, Footy Classified, where McClure was on, and he's got a big board up, and he's saying why track wants out, and these are the things: club's refusal to deal with the Oliver situation, club's management of his injury, club's run of poor form, desire to play in front of big crowds, ability to enhance brand/off-field earnings. So I don't know. That could just be 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝗁𝘀𝗁 just
it could be
throwing conjecture up there.
I mean, two things. One thing, a couple of weeks ago when we talked about it, I flagged, and it's been interesting since because it's been this. I must have read this word 100 times since the podcast 2 weeks ago. Is I'm critical of Melbourne's communication and that it's been a factor in a lot of sort of our challenges in the last couple of years. We talked about that at length. But I reflected afterwards, and I've thought about it even more so in the last couple of days, is communication's a two-way street. And that this idea that the team, his Track's teammates weren't aware of the significance of, where his head's at, in terms of the impact of the injury. Well, that's on Track as much as it is on the club, isn't it? I mean, they're his teammates. If you think of the footy club like a workplace, doesn't Track have a responsibility to his colleagues in this day and age when we're encouraging people to ask for help, and he hasn't made it clear? It's not entirely on the club to speak for him, and that if he wanted his teammates to know where he was at in terms of dealing with the trauma of what happened to him, then at least part of it is on him to communicate that to his teammates. I'm sure they have things called WhatsApp channels or something, because
he may have switched off his phone. He may who knows what.
You know what I mean? So it's not all on the club.
No, and I agree. And if what 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝗁𝘀𝗁𝘀 is saying is that there was already some going on, if he's not happy with how it handled, like him and 𝗟𝗏 used to be best buddies.
Yeah.
Obviously, we sort of know what happened with Track and with 𝗟𝗏 in the pre-season. If he's not happy with what happened there, and there's already fractures in the playing group or whatever, maybe they didn't reach out to him because there's no relationship there anymore.
Well,
or it was already on the outs, and this has exacerbated it, and it's a two-way street.
I suspect it's not about. It's less. This is just a vibe. Is that I wonder whether it's less about how they managed track last year, more about how they Clary last year, more about how they managed Clary in the preceding years. That's because you don't have to be out and about much to the you know what I mean? That issue didn't come out of nowhere.
No,
the Clary thing. So there's likely to be history to it. But what I would say is that it's, like I said a couple of weeks ago, I refuse to sort of get sucked into the media drama on this. If it happens, it doesn't. But people work stuff out all the time. It's like, is it irretrievable? Well, it's up to track whether it's irretrievable. He can retire from footy. If I'd play hardball of Melbourne. He made a decision. In how many years ago was it the track signed his contract?
It was, I think, in 2021. I think he
it was the
signed.
end of after the flag. It was after
the flag. No, but it was
after the flag.
So it might have been in 2022 then during the year, because I remember when it happened, I'd gone on a road trip with my daughter to Canberra, so I remember I was in Canberra when it happened. And that would have been during the year. I think it was early in the year, as in early in the footy year.
So he asked for that contract. He wanted the length. We agreed to it, and it comes with a considerable cost to the club. Yes, we lock him up, and that gives us power now in this sort of situation. But two, it means that there's a fair bit of dollars tied up for a long period of time, which makes it more difficult to, be able to organise to get another highly paid player to the club. So. Let's just see what happens and let it settle down is where I'm at.
It was 2021. It was May 2021. And the article I'm reading at is the Melbourne Football Club article, and the title is "Track to Stay a Demon for Life."
Well, I mean, some of those reasons, though, I think I said this 2 weeks ago, just on track. If I was to take my sort of hat off, my D's hat off, and just look at this sort of as objectively as is possible, with the idea of losing a generation of player to the Blues of all team. Yeah. It's bloody hell. It'd be like Ronald Barassi all over again, wouldn't it? It'd be like, but leaving aside that feeling, is that I actually think something that's not really been discussed much by the media that is equally of interest or equally potentially powerful is that there's no guarantee that Track will come back the player he was. That injury, he still can't get his heartbeat over 110 beats per minute. So you'd expect he's at least weeks, if not longer, away from being able to resume any meaningful training, which buggers up this pre-season, which buggers up next year. And what happens if he psychologically never, there's a thing with jockeys. I reckon it's the most dangerous sport in the world, jockeys. But some jockeys have bad falls and never are the same jockey again after that. And I'm sure it happens in footy. It happens in all sort of contact sports where injuries can, play. We've used this example a few times. It felt like Langdon took a full 12 months to get back to the player he was after he got his ribs broken, didn't it? There's been a number of other players who, after concussions or bad hits, never looked like the same player again after that. So, again, if I was to put my completely, objective hat on and take off my D's rose-coloured glasses, now it's probably if you're ever going to trade him out, he's 29, and if you can get value for him, now it's probably not a bad time to do it.
The only thing is, I'm happy to do that. And this might be from a selfish point of view that I don't want it to sound like, because I am sympathetic to any mental health issues that have arose for Track for this, and the health issues for his injury. But clubs, he might want out, and we might not get fair value if he does become back to the player he was or thereabouts. But there's also, he only wants to go to a Carlton and not just that, someone who's in finals contention. It sort of only leaves Collingwood and Carlton. Collingwood don't have the draft capital to satisfy us. Is there a player you would take from Collingwood? Forget his. Yeah, of course, would take Daicos. You can throw in his brother for free as well. That's not happening. They're not leaving Collingwood, so that's not happening. So it sort of leaves Carlton. I can't see McKay even like. Well, yeah, they might say that, but that's not fair to McKay either. McKay.
Well, he wouldn't. Obviously, he'd want to go, but in some respects, he might. That's
how does that make the other Carlton
what we
players
need
feel?
is another tall forward who can't kick straight.
Can you imagine Mackay wanted out of let's reverse it. Mackay wants out of Carlton. Track's playing and track is track. Mackay wants out of Carlton. He wants to go to Melbourne.
Yeah.
Would we say, all right, here's Petracca?
No, we wouldn't need to. We'd say, here's pick 5.
Well, okay,
no,
forget
honestly.
that. You're saying just Mackay's worth pick. All right, Cripps, whatever. Cripps at his height. He wanted out to Melbourne. Will we just give Petracca, just for a club to offload, how does that affect the rest of the playing group, the supporters, to get rid of it? It depends how much.
Well, it depends how much is in that sort of conflict. I mean, look, they can sort it all out. Like, people repair bridges all the time. If it's irreparable, it's on track to find a deal to get out.
If he wants and he will not play for me, he could just say, well, then I retire.
He won't. Like, there goes his brand. There goes his playing in front of any crowds. There goes.
But why can't we trade him to North Melbourne, who could give us Luke Davies-Uniacke and one of their high draft picks that they've got? Because
he's contracted, because of the contract.
Well, Mackay's contracted.
Yeah, but we can't force him to go.
Okay, then he stays. But
exactly.
Then he stays.
So
but then he says, all right, he chucks the sads, and I'm not saying he's going to do that, but we don't know. If he's so unhappy, the relationship fractured, and I don't know.
But look,
we're in a shit situation. It is terrible.
Is that it's he's now playing like, okay, they might have.
But how toxic is that environment?
All of that stuff, whatever. But at the end of the day, he's got a contract in the Melbourne Footy Club.
I know it's all good and well to say he's got a contract, but how toxic is that environment? If the players are unhappy, if he's unhappy, whatever, he's not happy with the club.
Whatever. Just let it all settle down. Yeah. Now the context, I mean, that wouldn't have been a very fun event to go to, I'm sure. No. But, the context of it's the end, a lot of stuff. Give everyone some time, some space just to let things settle. And, we don't have to all dance to bloody McClure and Morris's.
I know, but it sounds like there's a lot more smoke.
Yeah, there's a fair bit of smoke.
It's not the same as 2 weeks ago where it was,
But
could be
I'll tell you the other thing about Mackay is that he would help solve the ruck problem as well. There's
absolutely.
And we might be able to bring in an elite ball user because, Track isn't an elite ball user. So, that's why, that's what I said a few weeks ago. It's my Jared Healy rule. Like, I'm gutted losing Nibbler, but ever since Jared Healy left for the Swans, I'm, adamant that I'm not going to spend too much energy worrying about footballers who want to leave and contracts and.
Yeah, I know, but it's upsetting when a generational player as good as Christian Petracca wants to leave. It puts question marks on the club and
I've got no
whatever. I know. Well, we
it's
don't.
Like complaining about the weather, or it's like, what can I do about it? I can't analyse it. I don't.
Still doesn't mean you can't be upset about it.
Well, I'm not saying that. I'm choosing not to be upset about it. So others, of course, people can react however they want to react. I just, from my own personal perspective, is that it's, I give enough of my energy to try and figure out how and watch Melbourne play footy. If Track wants out, well, he wants out.
I've been staring at this post by Fox Footy with video from Gary Lyon about what he says about this. I do want to hear what he has to say. So let's have a listen. It's only
before we move on.
Yep. It's not moving on. It's about Petracca.
Circle back to the Pearl. I forgot.
Can we play this and then you circle back to the Pearl? Because this is still on topic. Right. Did Pearl talk about Petracca? I don't think so. No. Got to turn on the sound. Here we go.
Breaking, or the Ages reported it goes, this afternoon, Christian Petracca has requested a trade in his exit meeting. And Harry Mackay's been linked as well. Now, you were very strong. You were very strong last week on this program that Christian Petracca will not be traded.
Yeah, I did read that when you showed me. He may or may not have requested that. I don't know that to be true. But what I have spoken to people through the week, and I'm prepared to double down on it, is that he's not going to be traded. I can only tell you what's coming out of Melbourne. They are absolutely resolute that Christian won't be traded under any circumstances. And the Harry Mackay stuff is it's a hypothetical wake-up. There's nothing to... as we sit here today, there is not one skerrick of evidence or information or contact between club and Harry McKay that stands up. So, and I'm just telling you what's happening.
Well, they're in need of a key forward, Melbourne, so you think there's been no overtures?
I just said last week, if we're throwing them out there, I'm throwing Sam 𝗪𝗪cy. So there's your headline. That's how much kudos is in that story about Harry McKay, as much as me saying that they need Sam 𝗪𝗪cy.
What would it look like if the club was able to was going to stand firm and Christian Petracca had to walk into that environment?
Yeah, well, I think that's the next challenge for Christian. Well, not that I'm telling him anything, but when I'm looking from it afar, my understanding is that they're not budging. So Christian's got to get his head around to say, what does it look like when there isn't a deal being made, and what do I need to then do to honour the 7-year multi-million-dollar contract? And that is suck it up and get back to the club. I don't know if there's bridges that need to be built, but be a leader. Come back in and go, okay, boys, you know, I had a look around. I don't know, whatever he wanted to do. I still haven't heard from Christian. We haven't. So I want to hear from Christian. But at the end of the day, I'm told it's not happening. So he's going to get his head around and going back into the club and going, right, now I've got to lead and be a leader. And that's a challenge.
But wouldn't you be concerned, though, as an administrator of that club, your best player is clearly disgruntled, and this has been going on for a long time, the trouble that can cause. And we keep talking about Melbourne's culture. Where there's smoke, there's fire, Gaz, and it's been spoken about for the best part of 2 years. That would have to be a concern if you were an administrator.
Yeah, I don't think it would be, for sure.
And you wouldn't do anything about it?
Me, personally, I would not trade him under any circumstances, except for the one that I put out last week. And if in 3 years it's still it's festering, open negotiations with Tasmania.
Yeah, where there's smoke, there's fire. Let's create the fire and then the smoke and the, you know, it's.
My concern is how you repair that relationship. I don't know if that type of relationship can be repaired.
We don't know the extent to how badly broken it is. So what's the point sort of working about how to repair it? But we do know that stuff gets repaired. You know, it's up to track to a large degree. Look, to be leaving aside the trauma of what happened, exactly as Gary Lyon just said, he signed a 7-year multi-million-dollar deal. That was on him. That was his call.
Yeah. We didn't do other things, not that we weren't ever going to sign him, but we didn't leave room for other things because of that. So
exactly, maybe he could have thought through the consequences of signing a 7-year deal. You know, like, come on, it's like. But anyway, I just think let's see how it plays out and not waste too much energy.
Stay tuned. We'll be talking about this again.
Going back to the Pearl. What do these players have in common? Judd McVie, Marty Hoare, Jack Viney, Jacob van Rooyen, 𝗪𝗏 Woden, Bailey Fritsch.
They all currently play for Melbourne.
Well done, that's good. They were on the player rating, the AFL player rating, which, as I've said, is a really good measure because it measures the impact of every single intervention a player has in the game. Each one's measured, I think this is right, from -6 right through to +6. So there's a 12-point range on each intervention to arrive at the player rating. I'm pretty sure that's right. Or if it's not, it sounds very convincing. The bottom 6 players in this game were Melbourne players. Judd McVie had a player rating of 0.3, Marty Hoare 0.4, Jack Viney 0.9, Jacob van Rooyen at least broke 0 and got 1, 𝗪𝗏 Woden 2.4 and Bailey Fritsch 2.5. That's just nuts. So at the other end of the scale, the top 3 players were Nick Daicos, 21.3, Edward Allen. Who the hell's that? Some author or something?
He might be playing for Melbourne. He might be playing for Melbourne as part of the Petracca team.
Yes, like Edward Allen, 16.7, and John Noble, another, like it sounds like a law firm, Edward Allen and John Noble, he was 16.5. Our best player was 𝗪𝗏, 16.3. Unfortunately, he'll be missing for the first part of next season, so will our other one, Dan.
We'll talk about that later.
And Tommy McDonald was our next, and then 𝗪𝗏 Gawn and Salo. So, yes, the stats bear out Pearl's perspective. The bottom 5 players, worst players on the ground, were all Ds.
Okay, well, that's another thing about the Petracca thing. You mentioned Houston a second and the whole, that story that he's called on us because of that, and whether you believe that or not,
Or maybe Houston will prefer to come with Track gone. Maybe Track's not that likeable. Everyone says he's likeable.
The way that this has been handled, and Track sort of whether his grievances are right or not, he sort of threw the club under the bus. And if that affects us getting players, well, that's
keep the pick 5, go to the draft, pick up another gun.
Yeah. Yep. All right. That was another thing about St Kilda leapfrogging us, because any potential compensation that they get for losing battle will be after our pick. Now that if St Kilda were ahead of us, they might have got another pick adjacent to their first round pick. So
and
it's good
as someone pointed out on Demonland, I forget who, it was an excellent point, is that it also means we finished 15th, is that right?
14th.
Finishing 14th also means we're in that bottom third in terms of the way they do the fixture. So hello Sunday afternoon games with a red footy.
Forget that, but just our luck is that the teams we play will all be good next year. They'll turn the corner. We'll play North twice. They make the Tigers have this miraculous turnaround. The Eagles are flying, and then the teams we play once are all at the bottom of the ladder. So
the Swans have a swan dive, and
exactly. All right, let's get into
one more thing, Andy, before we go on. Surely we can celebrate the Pies missing out on finals.
Well, we had a little bit to do with them missing out on the finals. They did not beat us by the 180 points that would have been required in the end. So
I was able to bring out the golden oldie from years gone past. That two golden oldie. We've had a new golden oldie and an old one. The first one was. I was sitting in Melbourne, nominally a Melbourne only area, but it had an unnerving amount of Collingwood fans.
Didn't it? And I've got something to talk about that later, but that was from the President's Club, I believe. Where a lot of Collingwood supporters sitting there, but there's
been quite vocal, and I was able to sledge them by saying, when they got to about 40 points up, a half-decent team would have flogged us by 120 points, you bloody whackers. And then when they started the Collingwood chant, I was able to weave in, the Collingwood didn't make finals after winning a flag. So,
you're lucky you got out of there.
With I was opposite the President's Club, so I was probably the safest place of all to sledge Collingwood fans.
Oh, they're a different breed, Collingwood fans, aren't they, when you're walking outside the ground? Jeez. Supreme Demon says, the biggest question to be asked is, when are we going to stop letting Collingwood bully us? When will we stand up and fight back? Will Angus Brayshaw ever be avenged and Brayden Maynard, well, I'm not going to read that advocation for violence, sort of wants an eye for an eye, or will we continue to be laughed at as a soft and weak football club? Little Richard replies, this club has no taste for vengeance. Bucknecked said, thanks again, gentlemen. We didn't come to win, as spouted all week by the club. We limped over the line. Why not make a final go of it and win the hearts and minds of the supporters over the summer? What was your thoughts on booing Maynard all night? So I must say there's definitely a strong sense of bloodlust amongst Demon fans when it comes to Maynard. And I could definitely feel it firsthand at the game. I'm not one to support an eye for an eye mentality. I do believe we need to bring a bit more intensity and toughness to our play, especially when we're up against Collingwood. I think we lacked the edge in both of our matches against the Pies this season. It started earlier in the year when some of our players shook Maynard's hand. Christian Petracca, I'm looking at you. And look, I don't sort of need his head on a pike, but, a little bit of roughing up maybe. As for the booing of Maynard, I was definitely doing my part. Collingwood supporters, be mad, they really lived up to the stereotype of them not being the sharpest tools in the shed. You think they would have caught on to the fact that every time that Maynard went near the ball, the D's fans would seize that opportunity to boo him. And they could have anticipated this and tried to drown out our boos in advance with their louder cheers. But they were a little bit slow on the uptake, and to my amusement, their failure to do so felt like my grand final this year. What a bunch of dumbasses they are. Big Man, your thoughts on Collingwood being our schoolyard bullies? Do you think we should have brought a bit more mongrel into our game? Of course, we need to be fair, playing dirty is just sort of going to backfire, be counterproductive, all that. But maybe it's time that we stood up to them with a bit more grit and fire. Wouldn't mind seeing a bit of that every week. So what are your thoughts?
I could care less about the sort of 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝘁𝗲. I just want us to beat them.
No, a bit
like,
of
that'll do.
not the pushing and shoving and whatever, but just be a bit tougher. Maybe we'd put the cue in the rack
Tougher,
this
you win
week.
the game. You put, your 200 pressure in a quarter. That's what I want to see. I want to see hard at it footy, which wins us games of footy and beats the Pies. That's what I want to see, and that is tough. Run back, it's tough enough. The game's tough enough without sort of faux toughness. And as for the booing of Maynard, people pay their price entry and go for it. I can't. Doesn't really float my boat to boo Maynard.
It
wasn't as if like a night where we're going to get joy out of Maynard, booing Maynard. But people were pretty vociferous, weren't they?
Yeah, well, he'll cop it against us, you would imagine, for the rest of his playing days.
And was there a clip from?
I've got a clip, but then I've got something I want to say about it because I absolutely agree. It's sort of. I'll play the clip.
Gentlemen, it's the Demon Princess here, and I really thought I was going to be calling you from the G on Friday night, celebrating our equivalent of a grand final win. So it turns out it was a bit of a mess, and I cannot bring myself to watch the replay, so I will be relying on your analysis to tell me what happened. My seats are in a Melbourne reserved area on level 1. They're right down the front next to the interchange bench. They're great seats, and it's a really lovely group of supporters, but sadly most of them left when the game was on hold for the Storm. So the Demon Prince and I stayed until the bitter end because we never leave a game. And Bin Man, I don't know if you were there and if you saw that the level 1 seats were invaded by Collingwood supporters. So I don't know how they were let in, but we were surrounded by them and they were truly awful. Sadly, security wouldn't do anything about them, and it was a really terrible way to end the season because the Melbourne supporters and our boys on the ground were really being harassed by opposition supporters in what's supposed to be a safe Demons area. So you've talked about the stages of grief the last few weeks, and I really thought I was at acceptance, but I am not there just yet. Now, for me, it has grated that the last couple of years for the final game of the season that the team just leaves the ground with no acknowledgement to supporters. I know it's a little thing, but I really do feel it's a really sad way to end the season. So tonight I am looking forward to some Bin Man positivity. But as always, thanks to you legends of Demonland for all your amazing work and your analysis of the game, and a heartfelt thanks for helping us all to really get to that acceptance stage. Thanks, legends.
Well, thank you for the kind words about the podcast. And I'm assuming Demon Princess sits in the reserve section for Melbourne supporters at our home games in level 1, so that's probably below where you are, Big Man. I also sit in a Demons home game reserve section, probably just above Demon Princess on level 2, and I share a similar gripe. This is new for this year because where I sit, they remove the bar, and Big Man also sits in this section. They removed the bar from the indoor area and replaced it with the Channel 7 and Fox Footy halftime analysis studios. They relocated the bar to outside of our section, and in the past they used to check the season tickets passes at the entrance into our area, ensuring that only those who paid for the seats could access it. And now they've moved the staff responsible for checking the passes over to the outside bar area, leaving our section wide open for anyone to walk in and sit in. Now, I don't want to sound classist or anything, and I pay good money for those seats to be surrounded by fellow Demon fans at home games. I'm not interested in sitting next to or near lunatic feral opposition supporters like I'm forced to do at away games. And I'm not talking about keeping D's fans out. The more, the merrier. If they want to come sit with the elites of society like myself. But I want to keep the opposition riffraff out. There are no guards at the gates anymore, and I'm concerned that the barbarians are breaching our defences. I don't know if the MCG is cutting back on staff, but it seems like the lower bays where Demon Princess sits might also be experiencing similar issues with lax enforcement. And Big Man, is this something that concerns you well? Are you content to use your sharp wit against any opposition fans who happen to wander into our section like you did this week? But come to think of it, you're one of the hoi polloi that's invaded our sanctuary, I believe.
Well, let's not go into details. But suffice to say is that I'm directly above Demon Princess, and what a great message from Demon Princess. Just before I forget, I agree totally about, I think it would have been great for the players to acknowledge the fans, particularly the ones who stayed to the end, Andy, who didn't leave the club. So I totally agree on that.
I would have been there had
where I sit, which go on.
No, I wanted to add just about what she said about the players leaving. And I went to last week up to the Gold Coast, and the majority of Melbourne supporters, with the exception of the cheer squad who were behind the goals, were on one side of the ground, not the side of the ground where the race is and where the benches are. Now, at the end of the game, there was all just Melbourne supporters, and it was party time because the D's were doing so well. Yep. When the game ended, I would have thought the team would have come over and thanked the crowd, at least go over to the cheer squad, and they just went off the ground. I know it's late in the year and it was hot.
I think eventually they did come back out.
Maybe I'd left already. I don't know. Maybe they did later, but we were sort of waiting around, and they didn't come at that stage. Anyway, it's a little thing. I'm not as miffed as you, but I do agree that
But I think it's it's an issue particularly for the price that they sling you for tickets. So, absolutely, if part of what you pay for your ticket is, that's you want to sit with Melbourne fans because you can't be bothered. And I is in the area that's sort of down a bit from you and there weren't many Pies fans in there, but some young kids and so bang, Cherry seats right above the Melbourne interchange bench, just sort of the bay around for the members. And a couple of young Collingwood fans had got in there and were in there and sitting down in front of me. They were probably only 15, 16, and they were sort of started off a bit vocal, but I can be relatively vocal at the footy, and so they didn't have the kids didn't have much ammunition to shoot back, and they were 40 points up. So, but that's when I was sledging Collingwood, so I think they would be discombobulated to work out how to come back at me when we were 8 goals or 9 or whatever it was, 7 goals down. So. It wasn't
when you're being self-effacing. It's hard for someone to come back at you when you're already dishing out on yourself.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, to be honest, I agree. I can see why that's frustrating. It's just lucky it wasn't a close game because that's a different dynamic. And I still to this day we talked about it a lot on the podcast, but that final last year is the single worst experience I've had at a sporting event ever, and so it felt nothing like that. But that was partly because we were uncompetitive. And but for some positivity, pick 5, Demon Princess. Pick 5. It really is a game changer. Like this, they say this every year. That's a strong draft, but the statistics on the top 10 players, but in particular the top 5 players, is remarkable in terms of the data on the sliding scale of number of games of AFL footy that you get out of a player as you go from 1 up to 25, up to 30, up to 40 in terms of the average amount of games that each draft pick plays. And the top 5 is incredible. That I forget, I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but I think it's like 80 to 100 or something. So you get quality games out of your top 5 picks, and so we'll get a bloody good draft pick to add to our bevy of star young players. So I just hope we really attack the preseason, and I'm really bullish about next season.
Yes, next season. 6 months away, 7 months. All right, we've got some audio from Demonologist, and he's got something to say to you, Big Man, but not rudely.
Well, hello, Annie, George, and Big Man. It's Demonologist again. Well, my prediction came to pass, despite positive binners disagreeing with me. I said in last week's podcast that Melbourne's win over Gold Coast was more to do with Gold Coast's efforts, or lack thereof, than our great play. I mentioned that if the D's have a similar first quarter effort against Collingwood, like against Gold Coast, then Collingwood might have a lead that we can't catch, and the game could effectively be over. In a way, that's exactly what happened. I also suggested that Collingwood is unlikely to wilt in the second half as Gold Coast did. And in fact, of course, as we know, Collingwood powered on to win in a relatively easy way. Binners did say that Collingwood's recent first quarters haven't been exactly very good, which I took him at his word. But after the Collingwood game, I checked. Collingwood's first quarters, in fact, over the past 6 matches, in fact, they've led at quarter time 3 out of the past 6, were behind in 2 out of the 6, and level in 1. Now, Melbourne's first quarters comparatively look much worse. Behind in 4 out of the 6, leading in only 1 out of the 6, and square in just 1 match. Anyway, not with a bang, but with a whimper, the D's have limp out of season 24 with a 2025 season that is uncertain and a low level of confidence that we can challenge for finals. I pray I'm wrong. Come on, positive Binners, give me some confidence for 2025. And before I leave, thanks to all 3 of you guys. You do a wonderful job each week to analyse the game. And finally to Andy, I know how you feel, mate. I inhabit your MFC SS world too. Anyway, cheers, guys.
I'll answer for Big Man for the positive. Pick 5.
Pick five. I tell you, I mean, if you take a line through Windsor at pick 7, and Colt, I mean, that's what I'm looking forward to. Is that one of the benefits of this sort of butt end of the season is that we've got games into Colt. 13, 14 games I think he played. We've got 20 odd games. I don't think Cole played 13 this year, but I'll look it up while you go. Yeah, look, games into Windsor. We had a look at AMW, JVR. I can't believe how underrated he is. He'll go up a level. Turner will go up a level. I reckon I'm
10 games.
How many?
10 games.
Yeah, so there you go. He's got 10 games cold. He looks a gun. The top 5 players, the top 8 players are all, it's very deep midfield, like a lot of good mids. There's, we'll pick up a decent player there. Bowie, hopefully, like Cos is only 23. I think that our demographic is, way, way better than Collingwood's, for instance. There's all of the dramas at Melbourne has completely sort of covered over the sort of demise of Collingwood. Not that they won't have an opportunity to come back, but their list demographic is woeful compared to ours. So there's a huge amount to be positive about. And just on statistics, that's why you don't go with vibe bets. But I will point out, thanks, Demonologist, love your calls, love your mini pods, and you've been spot on. But I will point out that he did say, I think, if correct me if I'm wrong, Andy, 50% of their last 6 games, which is an interesting number to pick because, I didn't, but 50% still not great, is it? 50% first quarters is not great. But, no. He makes a good point about Gold Coast. Gold Coast approach to the game was not massively dissimilar to our approach in this game, I thought. Like they weren't running and covering and defending hard and sprinting and running their guts out, which is why I highlighted Saints' effort and the Bombers' effort, because both of those teams did try right to the end and really left nothing out there. So whether we were unable to because fitness is clearly part of it, but I think that a lot of players are checked out. So however, one player I really admire, Tommy Mack, and I know that's one of the questions on it. So,
all right. Lazy says, thank you to Andy, B-Man and George. My footy media intake dropped dramatically this year, and yours was the only footy podcast I listened to this year. Don't have a lot to say about the game apart from a limp effort tonight. We once again look confused with ball in hand. I believe we need to continue to develop the transition game and the red and blueprint and continue to bring in the kinds of players that can help us execute this. Your thoughts? Magnus says, gents, as always, love the podcast. Very frustrating game that was basically lost in the first half, really the first quarter. We are proud that our zone/all-team defence is our one wood. However, we switch this style. Should we switch this style to man-on-man for the start of games against teams with strong foot skills and the ability to rapidly move the ball? Any basketballer will tell you rapid ball movement is how you smash a zone defence. Later in the game, when the players are tired, you definitely switch back to zone. However, it just gets so frustrating watching Collingwood and Freo, 2 strong, skilled teams, smash our zone apart at the start of games and get a strong lead. Spirit of Norm Smith says, positives, Gawn, Salem, T-Mac, Chandler, Langdon, all could walk off proudly. Negatives, missed tackles, turnovers, fumbles, slipovers, no game plan, umpiring. Pies beat us in every stat except for turnovers. Our skills were horrible, and these were not risky kicks to create. Basic kicking errors. Zone defence, guard grass. What? Why? Pies Pies cut us up each time with run and skill. Man up. They destroyed us with uncontested footy. Kick, mark, run and overlap. It's been year after year. And we've got Rostar as a voicemail just on our game plan as well.
G'day boys, Rostar here again. And it was a disappointing showing, wasn't it? The Lightning Premiership. And I'll be honest, I don't leave games early, but we pissed off after the Lightning.
Oh, thank you for
Rostar.
Didn't think there was much to be gained hanging around. But anyway, I think a few players got stuck into the 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝗰𝗀𝘁𝗁. There wasn't any real intensity or effort, was there? It was pretty pitiful. I looked at the stats at quarter time, and there was 10 players from Melbourne side with 2 or less disposals, and 𝗍𝗀 was one of them who sort of got tagged out of the game. One distinct difference between Melbourne and Collingwood is it looked like Collingwood always, and they've done this for years, they've always looked to knock the ball to advantage and clear congestion any way they can, where Melbourne seemed to try and dive on the ball, but we ended up diving to ground, and then Collingwood would knock it out and we're one player down on the feet. So the game plan was strange. It was back to just kicking to the contest and hoping for the best, wasn't it? And it really, really showed the difference between a good, skilled side like Collingwood, unfortunately, as much as it pains me to say it. Their ability to kick to a teammate's advantage, which just Melbourne would kick it on top of their head, Collingwood would kick it out in front.
Yep.
So many times they just had overlap run, they chipped it around, they moved our defence, our zone defence, and then they'd kick it with precision into a dangerous spot in the 50. Our game plan seemed to be bomb it from wherever we get a really shallow entry, get it turned over, and then they'd just run it out. And that's happened plenty of times this year, hasn't it, where we haven't been able to halt the opponent's momentum. And I think when we let both 𝗍𝗀𝗀𝘀𝗁s have 40 posies each, probably tells you a little bit about the effort and intensity that really wasn't there. They had 275 uncontested possessions to our 180. And this has beaten us many times this year. Just that chip around and you know, our zone defence can't cope with that, especially without the regular players down back. And at one stage I looked down the back line, it was Tommy Mack, Adam Tomlinson, Laurie, 𝗍𝗀, Howes and Hoare. So that just makes it tough, doesn't it? But there did seem to be a distinct lack of intent and energy, especially after last week. Sorry about all the stats, Benners. I'm not trying to steal your job here. There was stuff that sort of stuck out to me. I think at the start of the year, you know, if we said to each other, all right, we're not going to lose a final in 2024 and we're going to blood some youth, then, yeah, we would have been happy, but probably not really the way we wanted it, is it? So all in all, disappointing season, but some extenuating circumstances, I think. There hasn't been many that have played all games for the year. And being in the bottom six hurts, but let's rest up and reset and kick on to 2025. But before I run out of my 4-minute warning, lads, thank you from the bottom of all the Melbourne supporters' hearts for putting your time and effort in each and every week. Really appreciate it. And, look forward to many pods.
He ran out of the 4-minute. Yeah, two minute
if you're listening.
Messages there. So, big man, zone defence being our OneWood, but we're not the same team that executed that game plan, and perhaps the game's evolved too. Why wouldn't we go for a more man-on-man approach, particularly early in the games and maybe when it's tight later in the game? What are your thoughts on zone versus man-on-man or sort of mixing it up a little bit?
Just a few sort of working backwards.
Yep.
Thanks for Rostar's calling in this year. An excellent addition to the podcast. Keep them coming. I agree with much of what he had to say. The one thing I would say, and I know it's like a broken record on this, it's a bugbear / I don't quite get it. But, you know, if you accept that we're not fit enough or we're not covering the ground enough, exactly like Goody said, that's why I asked you to play that part of the presser, is that, what did he say, that we're not defending the ground well enough is code for, that's how you cannot run a zone without doing that, right? So that is, a zone depends on abilities of players to multiple players, all 18 or who are on the field at any time to gut run when required, to cover a switch, to make, it's often what you don't see. It's like the reverse image. So if a Langdon gut runs to cover a switch that never happens, no one actually knows that that's what's the impact of that work rate. But that was clearly what fell away. So there's no point judging how we played on the weekend in terms of from game plan perspective, because if you can't execute the game plan because you're not physically up to it, well, then you're in trouble. So that goes back to why not go one man on man, which is what we did against Port. Essentially, that's what we did against Port. We wanted to win that game. We're still in the hunt for finals. They threw everything at it tactically to do exactly that, to deny the Port's ability to run fast. They don't switch as much as Port and Freo and also Collingwood, who looked to do it. We denied them that and worked really hard at man-on-man, and it was less zone, much more contest. But this game was, as I said, it was enjoy the dance or whatever it was. That, so go for it. There's no point practicing man-on-man now, is there? You might as well, apart from it would have been good to see a competitive game, but they were clearly, we talked about this last week, they've clearly got to they've got to evolve their game plan, and they've got to, get better at moving the ball quickly. They were taking on a lot of high-risk kicks. Rostar's point is really an interesting one about the high possession. If you look at the teams who have flogged us and opened us up, all of them have had massive high possession differential, disposal differential, uncontested in particular. And so it was in this game. They were 50 under contested possession disposals up. Maybe it was, now I'm getting confused, but after about 20 minutes of that game. And you could almost track our competitiveness in that game when it dropped below 50 for a point in the game is when we came back and looked like for a minute there we were back in the game. And then by the end it had blown back out to 80. So it got to 60, it got under, we were competitive. It was almost, I reckon if you looked at the graph of that uncontested disposal number, it almost matched the margins. And it just showed what oppositions are doing to us. They're trying to exploit our lack of run and spread the ball. That's what the Pies did to us. It's why they were able to move it from end to end so easily. Ditto Freo, but it's also what Bombers tried to do before the rain came in the first quarter again in that game. So teams clearly are aware where we're at. There was one example where it was both the probably a fitness thing, but also just a dead lack of speed, leg speed. Without Windsor in the team, we really missed his leg speed. And was 𝗟𝗍 trying to chase players down a couple of times. He just looked slow, and, Laurie looked slow, and, T-Mac is slow, and, even Gorney, he looks like he's running on one leg, basically. So we looked slow as well. I think it's probably, there's not much value looking at that game from sort of an analysis of the game plan, because, we just weren't running hard enough to execute any game plan. Doesn't matter what game plan, even if we went man on man, would have just made it they probably still would have opened us up and smashed us.
At the break of Gorn says there is an open-ended question. This is an open-ended question, but do you think we are starting to value the wrong things at this footy club? We bring in competitors who will play our contest and defence mantra, but what about valuing the skills of the game? When was the last time this club recruited an absolute elite field kicker? I'm talking a Goulden, Blakey, Dacos level. I see so many guys come through the door who are just average or maybe above average kicks. If we're ever going to improve our turnover game, we'll need some sort of drastic improvement in our kicking skills and decision making under pressure. And Billy Bean says the skill difference on Friday night was palpably obvious. What on earth do we do about it? Now, B-Man, I know that you'd like nothing more than to only bring in skilled players with elite foot skills, lefties in particular. I know that's your preference. I guess though you do need a bit of a balance of both contested beasts and the silky skilled players. Your thoughts?
Well, briefly, two thoughts. One, I think it's really easy to forget Goody built a game plan around the players essentially that he inherited, the gun players. And I'm talking about Oliver, Jack Viney, and Petracca. They were three guns that he took over from, and then Gawn. So he built a premiership team around those four players. And there was, I think he was ahead of the curve, or at least sort of picking up on where the Tigers were at around the shift between, there's been two big shifts in footy, I think, in the last decade or last 15 years. One is how critical pressure has become and winning the contest and being harder at it, basically. And that's one. Fitness is another huge thing. We had both of those things were our advantage in our flag year. Come the end of the year, we were running on top of the ground. We had a comparative advantage fitness-wise against other clubs, and we had 100% massive advantage at winning the contest and pressure. So, those bulls in there, those three bulls that I mentioned, fed by Gawn. But the shift, the third big shift in the last 10 years or so has been the critical sort of nature of scoring from turnover, and so that's when elite kicking has come in. But that question about why can't we bring those players in, I think that, to be fair, that's who Taylor has targeted. So you look at the last sort of few years who he's brought in. Seston was brought in for his kicking skills. His kicking skills not why he's not in the seniors yet. He hasn't built his tank yet, but he was 100% brought in for that reason. Colt was targeted because of his kicking, elite kicking skills at junior level. Ditto for Windsor. That was one of his, in the scouting for him, that he was supposedly an elite kick, and he looked good, and he looked good. Not as quite golden level as I was hoping for when I read about him. So that's three. You go back to Bowie was drafted as an elite kick. Laurie was drafted as an elite kick. JVR is an elite kick. So I think they've definitely looked at them, but only a couple of those players have really sort of made the next step. Laurie's an open question. I know he's resigned, hasn't he? So,
yep.
I think that's who I hope we target. I hope, like to God, that's who we'll target with pick 5, and we need to bring 2 or 3 players in with a kicking skill. So basically, if I was doing it, it would be show me how you can hit this target 99 times out of from 20 metres, and then all right if you can't, which it would be the silver lining in if we could get elite kicks in if Track was to leave. But Mackay is probably not one of them. So, but it's absolutely important.
Bigfoot says, once again, we did not adjust or handle the wet conditions as well as our opponents. We could not keep our feet, and the ball was once again soap in our hands. Collingwood did not have as many issues with the wet conditions as we did. Very frustrating to watch. You can't control the weather. You hope that the wet conditions would mask some of our skill deficiencies against a team like Collingwood, but to me, it only seemed to highlight them. Pin-man, wet weather. With the exception of the Essendon game.
The biggest myth in footy that wet weather is a great leveler because it exacerbates skill issues. The more skilled players, like my example before of the Bont, that goal it was a straightforward goal. He got the ball on the outside, ran and carried for 10 metres or whatever and kicked it from 14 metres out directly in front. But the wind was blowing a ridiculous gale diagonally across the ground up at Ballarat. And unlike almost every other player on the ground, he was able to slot it on the run. That's it wasn't wet, but it's the weather. It's the same. I remember years ago going to the Rose Hotel for a Melbourne Geelong game. And I can't remember why I didn't go to the game. And saying to my mate, at least it was pouring down with rain. At least it'll be a leveler. They beat us by 120 points, and it was a complete difference in skills. So, we've actually done better, haven't we, this year in the wet? There was a period where we were saying,
we had the Essendon game. That was a win. Can't think of too many.
I'm much more worried about the spongy grass still.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I just think it exacerbates our skill issues. Simple as that. That's that's really where I'm at on.
Nick 𝗍𝗂𝗃. Singer asks, why didn't we put any time into Nicky 𝗍𝗂𝗃? Last time we played Nibbler on him and he kept him to 15 disposals. And I get that it was a dead rubber and Nibbler was playing his last game and perhaps they didn't want him playing that negating role. But for F's sake, we should have sat someone on him. He and his brother ran riot and we probably just gifted him a Brownlow. Spirit Norm Smith says, tag Nick 𝗍𝗂𝗃. It worked previously, but we let him run riot from the start. 10 possessions by 20 minutes in the first quarter. Pies were then 4 goals up. Poor coaching. Nick 𝗍𝗂𝗃 is an absolutely phenomenal footballer. He's absolutely a strong contender for this year's Brownlow medal.
Kid can play, can't
on
he?
his defensive game, but when he's playing like that, you don't need it. B-Man, do you think we should have assigned a tagger to him during the game? Perhaps the decision not to tag him was influenced by the fact that the match was essentially a dead rubber and because of Nibbler's final game, the coaching staff perhaps wanted him to play a bit more freely, enjoy himself the last dance without the burden of a defensive negating role. I wonder, though, if we still had been in contention for a final spot, if this had actually been a finals match, do you believe our strategy would have been different? Would tagging 𝗍𝗂𝗃 have been a higher priority under those circumstances? And speaking of Nibbler in his last match for the club, what better way would there have been for him to conclude his career than by successfully tagging one of the best players in the competition, restricting 𝗍𝗂𝗃 to just 15 disposals again, potentially spoiling his chance of winning a Brownlow? And that would have been a memorable and impactful way to bow out, leaving a lasting legacy by showcasing his defensive prowess against a formidable opponent. I'm just a bit baffled that we gave them that tactical advantage, but I'm not blaming Nick. Surely that was a decision not to do that.
Yeah, look, of course. I mean, I think you're right. If it was we're playing for sheep stations, then maybe we would put some sort of time into him. That's what we've done in the past. Why wouldn't we do that again? A kid can play, that's for sure, can't he? And I mean, good Lord, his kicking ability doesn't help. You know, I would less say about not tagging him, more say about would it, be help if a Demon player could put him under enough pressure to at least.
Yeah,
you couldn't even get the Bronx cheer up, could you? It's like, oh God, he's hit another target. I just looked then at his numbers. He had a match high 11 score involvements. Yeah. That's bananas. I mean, like again, just on track, I shouldn't be so blasé about losing. I mean, track was. For 2 or 3 weeks after his injury, he was still the number 1 score involvement player in the AFL. He'd still be top 10, I bet you, even though he was out in at least top 15. Just from a game point of view, we probably win 2 more games if track stays in the team, or at least 1 more, maybe make final, who knows. So we really obviously missed track massively because he's a game winner, just like Nick 𝗍𝗂𝗃. And he's hard not to like, Nick 𝗍𝗂𝗃 too. He seems like a respectful young bloke who can, but he certainly can play footy, that's for sure.
One of the voicemailers, I don't know if it was Demonologist or Rostar, mentioned how Collingwood were kicking to advantage, or putting it out in front for the player to run into. And Nick 𝗍𝗂𝗃 does that a lot.
Yeah. Which is a massive.
I really like that, and you got to be a good kick as well, because you got to sort of weight it so that they run into it. But we don't do that. We put it on top of their heads to a contest or miss the player completely. But yeah, I really like how Collingwood do that. I wish we could do that.
Well, I'd be interested actually. Like, I'm not one of the things that in the off season is really interesting on Demonland is. I don't follow any sort of junior footy, and I'm amazed at some of the knowledge of a lot of posters have about players coming up and, draft options and all of the machinations with trading. It's incredibly impressive, and I don't really have the sort of switch off come at the finals. But what I'd love to know from sort of really good track watchers or people involved in junior footy is whether the sort of trend to, the importance of turnover in footy that I was noting before is filtered down to have greater emphasis on kicking skills at the junior level. Your dad might have a view on that, Andy.
I don't know. I don't know enough about it. I'm not one of those that follows all that.
because sort of logic would suggest that it probably would, wouldn't it? Because if 5 years ago or even 6 years ago, a big premium on a player like 𝗟𝗏, he was the number one pick, wasn't he? Like a grunt player, or Ollie Wines, he was another high draft pick, or even Jack Viney, where contest was king, and so that was valued super highly in draftees. And you can't imagine. I mean, Matt 𝗟𝗏 is an excellent player, but he's probably a bit like Ollie Wines, is already hit his ceiling, but like the raps on Matty 𝗟𝗏 were massive. And I mean, he's a gun player, but if you compare him to the next generation of gun players, almost like, what's his name? Jason Horne-Francis. He's a much better kick of the footy,
he's a phenomenal player.
So he's hard at it and a good kick. And so I wonder whether there's a lag between, what's neat, where the footy is going at AFL level and it filtering down to sort of the skills at junior level that are emphasised. And surely kicking is, it's always been important, obviously, but it's, it's so important now.
𝗍𝗶𝘀𝗁𝘀𝗁 Pickett, the bump, the suspension, and appeal, the upcoming appeal. Pew, pew, pew says, what did the panel think of 𝗍𝗶𝘀𝗁𝘀's bump and the resulting 3-match suspension by the MRO? Do you think we will appeal? Yes, we are. I know 𝗍𝗀𝗀𝗁𝘀 has prize with these types of indiscretions, but I think in this instance he has a case that he can at least plead in that Moore went to ground, and had he kept his feet, then perhaps it would have been a fair bump, because he could not have reasonably foreseen that Moore would drop like a lollipop. What do you guys think? And thanks for another great season of podcasting. Spirit Norm Smith says, tell 𝗍𝗀𝗀𝗁𝘀 never to bump again. It's too risky. And we got some audio from Roadstar just on 𝗍𝗀𝗀𝗁𝘀. Where's that?
𝗍𝗀𝗀𝗁𝘀's suspension, I think, is absolute BS. But the fact this year has seen players get suspended for the outcome and not the action, he won't get off. He's got 3 at the moment. He'll probably stick with that.
Well, the D's announced today that they are appealing the 3-match suspension of 𝗍𝗀𝗀𝗁𝘀, but I'm like Rosa, I'm not too optimistic about overturning the decision. I guess our main defence will likely revolve around the argument that a reasonable player, and that's the terminology that they like to use in these cases, could not have anticipated that the opposition player, Moore in this case, would fall to the ground. Had Moore kept his feet, it might have been deemed a fair bump, and I think that's really our hope. I hope we bring in a team of biomechanists to back up our argument, demonstrating how the physics of the situation made it difficult for 𝗍𝗀𝗀𝗁𝘀 to avoid the outcome. However, I reckon despite our best efforts, I'm sceptical that we'll get that outcome that we're hoping for, and this might mean that we'll be starting the 2025 season without 𝗍𝗀𝗀𝗁𝘀 for the second year in a row. I think he had 2 game suspension at the start of the year. Big Man, what are your thoughts on the incident? Do you think we should be advising 𝗍𝗀𝗀𝗁𝘀 to change his approach in these situations to avoid further suspensions, or is it just an unfortunate scenario where he just got unlucky in this instance?
Well, I haven't watched the replay, and I don't plan to. And so I only watched it live, and then can't even record. I don't think they showed a replay. I might have. Live, it looked really innocuous. And he, this is what I would be banging on about if I was in the media. He stayed out on the ground, clearly concussed. They kept him on the ground. They took him off. What were the Collingwood medics doing?
They took him off later.
Yeah.
There was the insinuation that maybe they did. Maybe they did it. He doesn't have to. He's not going to miss the next week. If they had a fine, they don't have the week.
I'm just asking questions, Andy. Is the Collingwood
just asking questions?
Are they cheats?
No, allegedly, you can't say that.
No, I'm just asking questions.
Not. Just asking. I'm just asking questions. Sam McClure. What's his name?
So I have I haven't even seen a replay of the incident, to be honest. So
look, anytime you look at something in slow motion, it's going to look bad. But the guys at halftime on Fox Footy, and I saw this on.
Were you at the ground?
I saw it on X afterwards. They had. I'm going to show you the things. No, I wasn't the ground. Did I? No, I didn't see you this week.
I looked for you in my binocular. You weren't there. So
I had left by then. I was there. I have the ticket stub
he protects us too much.
From Bass in my pocket to prove it. Anything you watch in slow motion is going to look bad. The guys at halftime on Fox Footy we're all saying he's got no case to answer for.
And apparently dropped, I saw that. It looked weird live What I would say is, I've said this earlier in the year, and it's a bigger conversation, but they should just ban the bump. Like, just what benefit does that? What benefit does it give? The Houston's a better example. That hit. What benefit to his team, even if he didn't hit him in the head and he just got him flushed down the middle? What benefit would have that accrued to Port? Flattening, who was it? It was
Rankine.
Yeah, Rankin, like nothing. The only benefit is that it rattles the cage of an opposition player. You don't, like the same in that 𝗍𝗲𝗀𝗁𝘀𝗁 incident. So he bumped, he didn't, if he tackled, he might have got a free kick for dropping the ball. But what does a bump do? That's probably not such a good example because it was funny the way it happened. But just ban the bump. And 𝗍𝗲𝗀𝗁𝘀𝗁 should, why bump?
Just quickly on 𝗍𝗀𝗁𝘀𝗁. He's
coming to Melbourne, isn't he?
Yeah, well, I'd take him.
I don't know. I reckon he's anyway. I don't know. He's soft. That's what we need. Some
as long as he
players.
kicks some goals. Yeah, here I am before banging on about wanting some hardness in the team. Mandy Lorian says, firstly, I want to thank you guys, Andy, George and B-Man, for fronting up each week in a difficult and frustrating season. It really is the highlight of my footy week. I'm looking forward to a better season next year. Secondly, I want to thank all the listeners who bring up some interesting questions and topics for discussion each week. Well done to the Demonland podcast family. It really is a team effort. Yes, thank you very much, guys. Thirdly, I want to give props to T-Mac for a fantastic season. We all wrote him off last year, and who would have thought he would have rejuvenated his career by going back into defence? He stood up week in, week out. His disposal improved out of side, with the exception of the occasional howler, but hey, this is Melbourne. It's in our DNA. By the end of the season, T-Mac was holding the defence together, and I thought he was outstanding tonight. Best on ground for the Demons. Leave it to Diva replies, great post and good to see someone sticking up for T-Mac. Despite having a couple of horrors towards the end of the year while playing on some elite talented opposition, he has been very good. He's reinvented himself, going back to his original charge, and has done exceptionally well. So much so, he deserves another year. Thanks, guys, for some great podcasts and dealing with my venting and negativity. Enjoy the cricket. Well, I'm not actually a cricket fan, so I'll just have to sulk for 6 or 7 months. A big man, a lot of us did write T-Mac off. He's had a stellar season down back, and as of now, he is out of contract. He will be 32 in 3 weeks' time. And providing he doesn't pull the pin and hang up the boots, would you be willing to give him another season in the red and blue?
Oh, 100%. I think that's spot on, that call. He was awesome this year. And I mean, his kicking was, he carved it up a couple of times.
Yeah.
But of course, like, that's mistakes. People, always make mistakes. You watch the other teams and you go, geez, if they were playing for Melbourne, you'd be all over them. But, he was awesome this year. And one of the things I've long said about following the D's, and in many ways it sort of informed how I think about footy, is the thing I loved about Robbie Flower the most is, I went week in, week out as a kid, and often it felt like all I was going for was to watch Robbie, because we got flogged so often, and it was so dispiriting. I admired his approach to I guess footy and sport, and by extension life, so much, because he played his best footy. The worse we played, the better he played. And I love that about him. And Tom McDonald was like that. He was one of our best players in this last sort of fag end of the season. And with the, week in, week out, he was awesome. He was, played fantastic. His player rating this year was 10.6. It's his best season. 10.30. His season average is 10.6, so he's above his season average. His previous best was in our premiership year in 21, which was 10.27. He's only had 4 seasons on that player rating better, 2015, 16, 17, and 18. He was enormous this year. A great leadership. As I said, I really admire players who play good footy when the team's playing poorly, and he was a shining light on the weekend. I thought I just loved the way he went about it, never dropped his head, looked like a player that, in those years that I mentioned when he played his best footy, we were in struggle town. He's played most of his career in struggle town. Yeah. And so I really admire Tommy McDonald. He's had, a difficult year personally with, I think he had family stuff. And, I think he's been probably almost the highlight in some respects for our year. Barely missed a game. Did he miss a game this year?
Not that I recall, because usually his injuries are a bit of a stint on the sidelines. But yeah, it's possible he played every game, but don't have the stats in front of me to confirm or deny that.
Terrific performance this year. So this year he's, as I said, 10.6. Disposal efficiency 74.5, which is pretty good. Kicking efficiency 70.3 this year, averaging 5.6 contested possessions, averaging 5.4 marks a game. Terrific season this year.
He did play he didn't play in the opening round game, so he played every game after that.
Every game after that, and in that context, it's well worth noting that he had ankle surgery again or foot surgery. So he is another player with interrupted pre-season, and so huge season from him, and I really respect the way he goes about his footy.
𝗟𝗶𝘀𝗁 says, nothing to take out of that game. A lot of guys looking for the end. Good to see Salem hit some form in the past couple of weeks. Thanks for the year, gents, and I look forward to a fresh and fit D's for 2025. Now, I have been a bit disappointed with Salem's season all, and I understand he didn't have the smoothest start. He's dealing with the thyroid issues in the preseason and then getting hit with some bad luck with hamstring problems during the year. But even with those setbacks in mind, I felt like his one standout quality, which is his usual silky, reliable disposal, just wasn't as evident this season. I thought he had a few howlers this week in his kicking. He just doesn't seem to be the same player that we saw in the first half of that grand final, and I'm willing to overlook the rough start, the injuries. I just can't help wonder whether the best of Christian Petracca might be in the rearview mirror. I really hope I'm wrong about that, and that he can get a clean run at 2025 with a full pre-season, rediscovering the form and the class that we've all come to expect from him. But if I'm being honest, including the injuries, it just didn't feel like he had it all together this year. Had a couple of good games, but
another, the key is what you said, is he's just got to get an uninterrupted run. I mean, 2021 was the only year he did, basically. And just on Salo, there's a bit of talk on Demonland with the pick 5. Would we consider splitting it and get sort of an 8 and 12 from that's how good that top 6-7 players apparently are. That could be a feasible option. All I'd say to that is that I'd still go back to the decision, as much as I love Salo and we got a flag with him playing, is that essentially we did the same thing and we could have got Josh Kelly and ended up with Hayden Hunt, Hunty and Jaden Hunt. It was Hayden Hunt. That's his long lost brother, Jaden Hunt and Salo. And as much as Salo's been a stalwart of the club, he struggled with injury, and Josh Kelly is exactly that sort of smooth moving sort of elite ball user that we lack. So I would go nowhere near splitting pick 5. Take it to the draft, get a elite ball user and get him into the seniors ASAP.
D-Minion says, I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to all of you for your consistency, for consistently showing up week after week to produce this podcast this season. It's clear that this year has been incredibly challenging for all of us, and I sense that the difficulties may not be over yet, with the off-season likely to bring its own set of challenges. Amidst the frustration and disappointment of what has been a tough season, your podcast has been a breath of fresh air. It has provided much-needed balance and perspective, helping to cut through the doom and gloom that has surrounded our club. Your insights and discussion have offered some solace during these trying times. I truly hope that you'll continue to be a steady presence even after trade week, just in case we need to come together for an emergency session to, dare I say, exercise whatever demons may still be haunting our club. Your voices have become an important part of navigating the highs and the lows follows, and I, for one, would appreciate having you around as we brace for whatever comes next. Now back to this current game. Given the conditions on the night, do you think losing Lever to illness pre-game had any bearing on proceedings? And Fiona from Facebook, thanks for that, but thanks, D-Medium, for that. That was lovely. Fiona from Facebook says, ugh, please talk about what a disgusting way to say thanks to supporters that performance was. I thought Goody always stuck to like for like. 𝗟𝗲𝗀𝗀𝗀 is not like for Lever. Stop being pig-headed, Goody, and throw Petty down back. We needed some experience in that back line. What a way to show what the MFC means to all. Our 64 team, our retiring Big Benny Brown and A&B got shown utter shite. There is something wrong with the feeling at the club that you can't throw everything at that last game. Coaching has appalled me for a while, whether it's Goody or other coaches. They need the heat turned up on them. Utter crap. How about you organise an end-of-year chat with Purdy? Thanks for Hannah. That was very emotive. I'd love to have a chat with Purdy, but I feel he's going to be a little bit busy in the coming weeks in the off-season. Just in reference to the late change of Woden in for Lever, Big-Man, what are your thoughts on that change? Not exactly like for like, but the conditions probably did suit the smaller player. Do you think it had any bearing on the outcome of the match?
Oh, well, I mean, we still would have lost the game with Lever if we played with the way we played. But yes, I mean, it was, you know, he's another top 6 player, isn't it? So, you know, we're missing 5 of our best 6 players from that lineup, and Maxi's walking around Maxi could barely move.
Yeah, I think he's probably waiting for the end. Just on Maxi, by the way, in the All-Australian squad, hopefully getting his 7th All-Australian
what a
jacket.
performance. Deserves it. I mean, he's had an awesome year.
It's later in the week. Yeah.
I would be good to get Purdy, but I could guess what he would say. You know, it's like
and look at any of the interviews he's done recently.
You could pretend to interview me and I'll be Purdy.
But what can they say about the Petracca thing? They can just say, well, he's got a 5-year contract.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, I at least, you know,
they'll be
I'm going to reframe the situation
fires.
for Purdy. They're not asking him about our lack of training facilities, are they?
Yeah, that's
we got bigger issues. Our star player who wants to leave, and
well, that's another thing. That's, you know, not having a home base. People. If you get shown around any other club,
point to his PowerPoint.
I'm telling you though, if you show any players to 2 different clubs and show them facilities at other clubs, and then take them to Melbourne. And even if the facilities out of 𝗙cie are any good, you got to drive an hour down the freeway.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. Of course, that's a bigger factor than this rubbish about the culture. I mean, all footy clubs have got, you know.
Yeah.
But like in 2 weeks' time, on that Friday night when the Dogs play, which is another boneheaded thing the AFL are doing, is like the Doggies women team are playing that night, same night, like at 5 o'clock or something. So, you know, and they're doing the launch of their elite training facility at the, you know, that's where we're at. Is that growing up, the Doggies Melbourne were always in struggle town, but at least we weren't as broke as the Doggies. You know,
but this is their second time they've done up that facility there. I went there a number of years ago because I've got family members on the other side of my family who were associated with the Bulldogs. From my wife's side, and we went to some opening of a brand new thing. So this is, and it was state of the art at the time.
They're opening their training facilities with the gym.
No, it wasn't just the stand. There was also training. They had done quite a.
And they've resurfaced the ground, and it's magnificent. They've got housing around it. They've done a top job, and we've, you know, still got a shelter shed. Gosh, it's pathetic.
Come on, it's still in Footscray.
Yeah,
you live there, don't you?
Jesus, Andy, it's a great spot there. So, no sociological jokes.
I'm really showing some elitist behaviours there.
Yeah, just a reminder, you left the footy soft.
I wasn't the only one on my trainer.
I wasn't the only one. What sort of comeback is that? Soft. I can't believe it.
Absolutely soft. I'll wear it.
To get home in time, you must be live fairly close then to get home in time to watch the rest of the game.
I'm very close. These elites, we don't live that far from the city, mate.
That's part of it.
I'd had my driver pick me up right outside the ground. Monocular says, Monocular's got supposed Demon fans in the game day threads on Demonland in his crosshairs, and he says, thanks once more to Andy, George and B-Man for your tireless work getting my favourite podcast to air each week. Between you, there is balance of humour, reason, optimism and pessimism, won't name who. Feel personally attacked there, and passion. I couldn't help noticing on the game day thread just how many posters, ostensibly and presumably MFC supporters, who incessantly bagged many of our players and of course the entire coaching panel, recruiting and trading staff. I just wonder why they bother, quite frankly, and whether they actually love our club. Only one team can win a flag, and every successful team needs to reset and rebuild, though not necessarily involving bottoming out. Many of our players have had bad nights or were beaten, yet we were missing quite a few automatic picks in the lineup: May Lever, Oliver Petracca, maybe Sparrow, Spargo, and of course Brayshaw, many of those being experienced leaders. The season was disappointing to say the least, but is the glass half full or glass empty? We've blooded Windsor, Tolstrup, Howes, Cape Brown, and got games into JVR and McVie. McVie may or may not turn out to be a gun mid, but at least, yes, through circumstances, he has had a feel of the midfield and may or may not settle there or concentrate on becoming a gun defender, which, of course, he has shown plenty. Looking forward to this being discussed a bit tonight and in a full season review. Yeah, we'll get into all that. And again, after trade and draft time. Thanks again, and go Demons in 2025. Exciting times ahead, though there may be many, though many here will have nothing good to say about our beloved Ds, players, staff, recruiters, traders, etc. until we win another flag. Even then, some will complain about the margin and lack of killer instinct when we lead a grand final by 60 points and end up winning by only 50. I can't help feel to be personally attacked there once again. I'm probably one of those that will be complaining we didn't win by 100. Big man, I don't usually engage much in the game day threads on Demonland, especially when I'm actually at the game. The atmosphere in the game day threads on Demonland can get incredibly intense and emotional. In the heat of the moment, things are said. Frustrations can boil over. It can become quite overwhelming, to tell you the truth. I guess my advice to anyone who doesn't have a thick skin about the club should steer away from the game day threads and even the post-game threads, particularly after a tough loss. The majority of Demonlanders are very passionate. It's easier to get caught up in emotions. Sometimes it's probably best to take a step back and avoid online drama. Big man, you don't go into the game day threads on Demonland.
I haven't gone into the game day threads for 3-4 years. It's like,
it's a lot of baby getting thrown out with the bathwater in those threads.
Yeah, but also I can't, to be honest, like leaving even that aside, I couldn't stand that aspect of it. But I can't even, I don't understand. For me, I'm so intensely watching the game of footy. I'm single track. I can't do that and be sort of messaging on Demonland, particularly the length of my posts.
Yeah, well, that's another issue. I can sort of do it if I'm sitting at home watching TV, but really,
I'm focused,
at the
if
game.
It's a live game. I'm focused on the game. Yeah. I sort of dipped my toe into the 𝗙cie game day thread, and that was harrowing enough.
Yeah. Usually, if I ever do post in game day, and it's never when I'm at the game, and it's usually when I'm on the couch, it's quick fire things, good goal, he shirked it.
What I will say, though, is that I don't know whether you'd know better than me in terms of, but I've been posting on Demonland a long time, sort of 12 years. That's a long time to be. And it seems to have got a lot more negative in the last 12 months. Maybe that's my...
in general, or like game day and post game?
No, in general. And there seems to be sort of this. So I've post a lot less, or a lot less free. There's whole threads now I don't bother to go into. Things like titles. I'm just looking now. It's like, another D on the move. Tigers keen on star.
No, that's you haven't looked in that. That's a joke.
I don't like half the time the title just says to me, "Don't go into that thread. Don't go into that thread." And it's like, and then because I've been on Demonland for so long, I feel like there's discussions that I've prosecuted before, and it's like, well, let's, I don't want to going over the whole ground again.
Look, despite the success that we had in the last 3 years, I think a lot of the two straight sets, particularly at the end of the year, got people upset. This year, there hasn't been a lot to smile about at Demonland.
No, but I think that point about resetting for 2025 really sort of picks up what was it Clayton Van Oliver and Dutch Demon's comments last week. They were so right about the way sort of football clubs are going. And it's true also of the bigger sort of football clubs in soccer in Europe in terms of, you want to be successful for a long period of time. That's what Goody said. And so, it's just the game is so taxing that, teams need to reset. If Blues had missed out of the finals, are people seriously, if you're not a Blues fan, are you seriously thinking they're gone next year? Is anyone seriously thinking Collingwood are gone next year? One of the hot teams at the moment is the Dogs. Like the Dogs won the flag in 2016 and have been in and out around the 8 finals ever since, and well in contention to win a flag this year. It's just the way the sport's going, and so this idea, like I couldn't believe it. It's just it was such a sort of clear example of how the football media is dominated by boneheaded ex-footballers. Is talking about. I saw. Some comment from 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝘁𝗃 talking about, well, inevitably we'll go, and supported by Dixon, not Brian Dixon, whatever that Dicko is, that inevitably we'll go back down now. We've had our time in the sun, our premiership windows slammed shut on us, and, down the bottom we go. It just does not work like that anymore. Swans, the Cats, even the Pies to... Well, we'll see what happens with the Pies, but I expect them to keep going. The Lions, Port, all clubs who have not tasted premierships, haven't been, hugely successful, particularly, let's say the Lions, the Pies won one. There and thereabout for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years in a row. That's the way the sport's evolving. And so, we'll be there and thereabouts next season, and a lot will depend on what I said through the season, is that you've just got to get through without too much bad luck. And every time, every straw, that you add on the camel's back, you just hope that you don't get too many until the camel breaks its back. So, luck is a huge factor. And it's time, we deserve a bit of luck. It's time we got some.
Yes. Now, I'm a big fan of alternate histories, and Oh My D says, imagine an alternate 2024 for the soon-to-be minor premiers, and now major premiers. Oh, no, they are minor premiers. They are confirmed. The Swans. Before the season begins, Dean Cox resigns to coach Richmond. Backup ruckman Laddens requests a trade to an interstate club. Nick Blakey retires after repeated concussions. Isaac Heaney, Hayden McLean and Dane Rampey all have compromised pre-seasons. Then Oliver Florent breaks his collarbone in opening round and misses 2 months. Corey Warner injures his Achilles and is out for the season. Logan McDonald injures his knee after 5 games and doesn't play senior footy again. Taylor Adams is badly out of form with just 2 senior games all year. Harry Cunningham has a knee surgery mid-season and looks hampered for the rest of the year. Errol Goulden has a season-ending grade 5 lacerated spleen, 4 broken ribs and a punctured lung. Goulden's management later leaks that he would leave the club if he wasn't contracted. Tom Papley had a disappointing season, kicking half as many goals with half as many disposals than usual. John Longmire is hospitalised with a serious skin infection mid-season. Tom McCartan is hospitalised after breaking his ribs in round 21. Isaac Heaney plays with a broken hand and a PCL injury for most of the season, but still ends up with a top 10 finish in the Bob Skilton medal. Sam Wicks requests a trade to Adelaide for family reasons. Does any of this sound familiar? Any other club would have had a season as bad as Richmond or North had they suffered the misfortunes we've all endured this year, especially with injury. Whatever the media narrative would have us believe, all things considered, we've had a relatively successful year, being in contention for finals up until the last few games and 11 wins. He's hoping we nail our pre-season and the footy gods smile on us in 2025. Up the Redleggers. Well, that certainly is the multiverse of madness. Someone please find for me the universe where the D's win every flag. I believe I could be truly happy there, Bin Man.
Take that as a comment and an absolutely just a spot-on brilliant post. And that is so right. And if anyone wants to get a sense of the impact of that, is the Saints, despite being at the time 15th or 14th on the ladder, were playing a team playing for finals on the weekends. And the Saints were $1.72 favourites for that match. And that's because Carlton have been decimated by injuries. Like, they've been caved in by injuries. And it just, if you can't get your best 6 or 7 players on the field, you're toast in footy. It's the same for the Pies. The Pies, a huge factor in the Pies missing missing the finals this year is the number of injuries they had. I mean, it's a massive factor. The Swans have been, blessed this season, but their run, of bad form coincided with the only period of the season they've had injuries. It is the biggest factor in football and has been ever since I started following the game, and it's consistently underplayed the impact of injury. And so, I think we've been conditioned almost to sort of collectively ignore it as a factor. It's a massive factor. It was a massive factor in 2019 when I think that was the last time we had a season as bad as this. It was a massive factor in 22. The way we finished it was a factor last year with the impact to our forward line. It's massive. It's it is the biggest factor in football in terms of a team's chances of winning a flag. And so I think that post is totally spot on. And I really feel like this season has, it's got really strong 2019 vibes about it. Taking advantage of the injuries, retooling, implementing a new method, and springboard into the next couple of seasons.
Oh My D's asks, is this the last podcast for the year, or are we doing a season wash-up? 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝘁𝗏 replies, they also have a pod post-draft, I reckon. And my response to Oh My D's and 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝘁𝗏, no, it's not the final podcast of the year. We still have more to come in the weeks ahead, though I don't have an exact date for you just yet. After what has felt like the season from hell, though I'm sure Big Man would object to me using that phrase you did a few weeks ago. I need a bit of a breather. However, we will absolutely be doing our annual season review show. In previous years, we've combined our season review with a wrap-up of trade week, so you can expect something similar, but stay tuned for more details. I'll plan to do my best to arrange another interview with Jason Taylor after the draft. It's always great to get his insights into the new recruits and hear his thoughts on how our recent draftees from the last couple of years are developing. I can't make any promises, I guess, on that, but I'll certainly try to make it happen. So in the coming weeks, I'll start a new thread on Demonland where you can submit questions that you have or comments about the season and what lies ahead.
I'm already worried about opening that particular thread.
I know.
You'll have to censor it for me.
We'll incorporate those into the season review show. Just like in our previous years, we'll break down the lines, the mids, forwards, backs and stuff. And of course, we'll have a good laugh at how off the mark our pre-season predictions were. I can't even remember what I said, but I'll dig it all up. So stay tuned for all of that. And because we will be doing a 2024 season review show, we won't be answering the following questions that were submitted by Demonlanders for tonight's shows, but please repost when I do open the season review thread in the coming weeks. Delightful Play says, thanks for all your efforts on the podcast this season, Andy, George and Big Man. We've gone out with a whimper rather than a bang. You're not the first person to say that. What do you consider the priority to help us reconnect as a team, recover from the shit show of a season, from retirements, media BS and injuries, and take 2025 by storm? Thanks for that delightful play. Big Man, perhaps you can answer this one briefly now. There's a lot happening behind the scenes at the club right now, and much of it playing out in the media, whether they're genuine fractures within the team or if it's just the perception being fueled by relentless media speculation about our culture. It's hard to say for sure. And, a lot of talk about disharmony, the questions about culture, the constant scrutiny. It does feel overwhelming, and I'm sure the players are not immune to that noise. And given everything we've been through this season, the retirements, injuries, media circus, the ongoing media-fueled drama surrounding track, it's only just starting, guys. What do you think is the best way for us to pick ourselves up off the deck, if we are in fact on the deck? How do we come together as a team, brush off any of the challenges, recover from what Delightful Play has rightly called a shit show of a season? How do we shut out all the fugazi, the noise, the distraction, Goody's favourite word, and focus on taking 2025 by storm? What steps can we take to reconnect as a unit, rebuild our momentum so that next season when we come back we can be stronger than ever? You can solve it all.
Get fit. Yeah, and I mean one of the benefits is that hopefully whatever happens with track is that the younger players have got an opportunity that, and all credit must go to Goody, is he's taking that opportunity as a, I think who was the question from?
Delightful play.
No. Monocular made that point about the opportunity to blood the whole bunch of young players. Let's hope, those young players like Colt and Windsor and JVR, they've got an opportunity to make a statement about what they want at their club as well, to stand up and sort of fill that vacuum of leadership that we've lost with Gus going and with Nibbler also leaving. So there's an opportunity for those young leaders to step into that space. There's already talk that Clary's going to go overseas and hopefully not to Las Vegas and train super hard. And Goody said he's super committed, and I think that will go a long way. Let's let the Petracca stuff, give time and space and see what happens and not fuel it. Let's not, just feed into all of that stuff. Is what I'd say. And the other thing I'd say on that is that we've got collectively, I feel like we've got short memories. If you go into Demonland and put in your search function, go back to 2019 at this time of year. Like it was worse than now in terms of predictions, or equally bad now. 2 years later, we won a flag. The ditto for the end of the COVID season, there was plenty of negativity. At the end of that season, if you remember, Andy, all the talk was Oliver was going to Carlton for all money. And similarly, before Track re-signed, he was gone to the Pies for all money. 𝗍𝗲 was gone to Port for all money last year. It was all drama on that front. Petty, the same. Is that, we've had the annual Bartlett sort of fun and games around, having sort of the stuff in the media. So we've been in this space for ages and we've bounced back, and, there's a lot to be said that maybe that will actually galvanise the club. They'll do the review, they'll work out what they could have done better and go again. So that's the way forward.
Okay, let's invent a time machine.
Let's skip through 6 months.
What says, ignore the game, it was irrelevant. What would you accept as a suitable trade for Petracca or Lulliver or Fritsch or Bowie? What are our glaring weaknesses, and do we have the players to currently fix them on our list, or do we need to recruit to bring in to fill holes, plug gaps, create competition for roles? Which of our youngsters do you expect to get better in 2025? Which of our fringe players do you expect to cement a role in the AFL side in 2025? And those are excellent questions for our 2024 season review show. So stay tuned, what say what, and all of our listeners as well. Stay tuned for that. Billy Bean says in 2018, Fritsch was used off the half-back line. Could we use him back there from time to time to get him more into games and utilise his better-than-average kicking skills? Does Spargo have a role next year in replacing AMB's ability as a defensive half-forward? Also, another excellent question for our upcoming 2024 season review. So stay tuned. I won't ask you to get into those, Bim Man, because we're already up past 2 hours. So we're going to leave it there. Anything else you want to add before we leave?
Apart from, for the first time in several years, I'm going to invest time in watching all the clips of the top 10 players and ignoring all of their weakness. If we don't pick them up, they're hopeless. If we get them, they're the next Gordon.
I've always said highlights are dangerous. I looked fantastic in my 30 seconds of highlights package.
Yeah,
you'd be very impressed with my highlights package.
That's probably a niche market. Like create highlights of day-to-day highlights of people and just show them. So that's what I'm going to be doing really getting stuck into the Spring Carnival. I could care less about footy now. Apart from the fact I hope you got on board and backed the Swans at the 6.75. They're into 3.70 favourites. So
I'm not convinced they're going to win the flag.
No, I'm not convinced either, but punting's about value, Andy.
Yes, that's true. Who do you think will win it? Just not punting. Who do you think?
Well, history says it's more likely to be top four than not, isn't it? So every year they'll have the song and dance about teams outside top four. But I do like the look of. I think the Dogs are well positioned in terms of the sort of where they're at the moment. They were pretty impressive on the weekend, even in it was pretty tricky conditions. But Swans deserve to be favourite. Who do I think will win? I mean, probably I'm a bit sort of ambivalent. Just hope not Cats.
Not Cats, not Carlton.
But I tell you, Port were very impressive on the weekend. So, if between Port, Lions and probably Port and Swans, one of those two teams.
As much as I hated this team at the inception and particularly after the Scully thing, shout out to Jesse
I
Hogan.
want the Giants to win. I
was happy Jesse won the Coleman.
Yeah.
And I'd be quite happy for them to win it. I don't know anyone that barracks for GWS, so have at it.
I'd be happy for them to win it too, and happy for AFL footy, to be honest. A lot of money's been, poured into that club, so it could only be a good thing if they were to win a flag. And they've, they're another team who've been up. They dipped down for a couple of years, but it's, they're not as if they completely went down the bottom. It just doesn't, there'll be some teams like the Tigers who will try and do it, but the teams try and stay up the top and then top up, and which is the model that Goodwin's trying to implement at the D's.
Well, we're going to leave it there for tonight. We'll be back in the coming weeks for our 2024 season review, as well as a wrap-up of trade week and the draft. I'll let everyone know when that's going to happen. Thank you to our 5-star reviewer on Apple Podcasts. That was D in a kilt. Thank you to our commenter on Facebook, Fiona. Thank you to our voicemailers, Demon Princess, Demonologist, and Roadstar. Fantastic, all of you guys and all of our other voicemailers who throughout the year provided those voicemails. It really adds another aspect to the show that I really enjoy. As always, your questions and comments are an integral part of the show, so thank you to our Demonland posters who submitted questions and comments. Thank you to Bimman's nemesis, the Pearl, Supreme Demon, Little Richard Bucknecked, Lazy Magnus, Spirit of Norm Smith, At the Break of Gorn, Billy Bean, Bigfoot, Singer, Pew Pew Pew, Mandy Lorian, Leave It to Be, Diva, Travi14, D Minion, Monocular, Oh My D's, El Diablo 14, D Live for Play, and What Say What. Thank you to my co-host Bimman. Thank you to you, our loyal listeners, and don't forget, leave us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts from, and we'll read it out on the next show. Go Demons!
Go Red Leggers!